Welcome back to This Week in Privacy, our weekly series where we cover the latest updates with what we're working on within the Privacy Guys community and this week's top stories in the data privacy and cybersecurity space. Privacy Guides is a nonprofit which researches and shares privacy related information and facilitates a community on our forum and matrix where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving their digital rights. Before we dive into this week's show, here's a brief rundown of how the show will be laid out. We'll start by covering site updates. Then we'll discuss the top stories in data privacy and cybersecurity. Next, we will explore some trending posts on the Privacy Guides forum. Finally, we'll answer viewer questions. If you have a suggestion for us, please leave us a comment in the forum thread or the YouTube chat as always. So, Nate, let's kick off with what we're working on in Privacy Guides this week.
Alrighty. Yeah, so we've got a lot of exciting updates this week. First off, a shout out to Kevin. Kevin wrote an excellent article about the RAM shortage and what's causing that, what your options are. That unfortunately is one of those things that's not really directly privacy related, but it has kind of trickled down to the privacy community because, we all buy phones, computers, and things of that nature. So definitely check that out. Even if you don't plan on buying anything anytime soon, I still think it's worth checking out because this is probably going to last a while, unfortunately. Um, we have a new privacy shorts channel. So we're taking all our shorts, we're moving them to a dedicated channel. It's at Privacy Guides Shorts on YouTube. And that is for shorts, clips, all the short form videos. So that way, if you don't care about shorts and clips, then it's not going to clutter up your feed. But if you do, you now have a nice dedicated channel that you can go check out. So definitely make sure that you follow that. We will have one more big video out by the end of the year. I feel like we've said what it's about, but I can never remember if I have or haven't. But it's a kind of I would say it's a back to the basics video about how to get started in privacy and reach your goals in a sustainable way. So we'll say that. And I think the big news that a lot of you guys probably saw is we released a video interview with Taylor Lorenz, who is a journalist, and we talked about some upcoming legislation here in the US about privacy online and identity verification and all that kind of stuff. So that is what has gone on this week.
Yeah, and Nate, I when I saw the video this past weekend, I was actually surprised and shocked. But something that I did remember was Taylor Renz did kind of like did a call like public like call for any available journalists, media specialists, podcasters to actually speak with her. And I'm really glad that we were able to get this around so quickly, like on the weekend too. So the huge shout out to you and Jordan for working on that, like on a Saturday. So I guess based on your conversation with Lorenz, I was just wondering though, like, what do you learn specifically from your conversation with her? Do you feel like the situation in the US right now in terms of age verification laws and censorship is worse than it appears?
Real quick, shout out to Jonah as well because he was part of working the weekend with us on that video. So it was a team effort for sure. Man, that's really tough to say because sometimes things are not as bad as they seem because sometimes it's just like a really vocal minority making a big deal out of nothing. But I unfortunately I don't think that's the case here because you know Taylor pointed out multiple times in the video that this is a bipartisan effort. This is not like the Republicans are doing this, the Democrats are doing this. This one fringe person in that particular party is doing this. Like sometimes we see that. This is a bipartisan thing, and it's something that both politicians on both sides of the aisle here in the US seem really bullish on. And they seem like especially repealing Section 230, they seem to think this is like this really awesome idea that's going to solve all our problems. And they're all about it. And I worry that when they get so excited about something like that, I think it's going to take a lot of public backlash for them to pull back on it, unfortunately. So yeah, if you're in the US and you haven't contacted your politicians yet, I think you really should, because I think better safe than sorry, at least.
Yeah, I agree. It seems weird because I know that at least from the past previous times we discussed it, it seems like this is a very bipartisan, but also a very big tech friendly initiative as well. Like we see though, however, with how so many big tech platforms are trying to give accountability to smartphone manufacturers such as Apple and Google.
Mhm.
And I'm just surprised to see, okay, right now in the US, it seems like they're preparing for it to happen. They just don't know who to give the most liability to. Should it be the platforms, the websites, or should it be Apple and Google because they're the ones who control all the smartphones in the world? Um, so my second question to you is actually is like since you've getting a lot more insight on all the individual bills from your conversation with Lawrence, I was just wondering though, do you think the bills will actually pass in a federal level? And is there anything we can do to actually stop it per se? Do you feel like beyond contacting representatives, for example, um, how can we learn more about to stop these bills?
Man, I mean, do I think they'll pass? I think they will if nobody stops them. I don't know. How should I? Taylor made the argument. And this may have been in one of her podcast episodes, or maybe it was one of her guests that she interviewed that made this argument. But somebody I heard recently made the argument that the UK Online Safety Act passed because it didn't get enough attention in the UK and there wasn't enough pushback in the UK. I don't know how accurate that is. I'm not from the UK, so I can't say how much it was discussed there. But I think it's if we don't speak up, I think obviously they'll just take that as consent and be like, all right, let's do this. What can we do to stop them? I mean, yeah, like I had mentioned, contacting your politicians. One of our forum members did mention that they went to that badinternetbills.com website and they felt like it was a little bit unnecessarily partisan. So they went ahead and changed the message that it sent to their politicians, which I think is great because you can do that. That's why it gives you the option to like, hey, here's the message we're going to send. And if you kind of want to tweak it a little bit and like maybe make it a little more personal or maybe change some of the wording, like the important thing is that you contact them and say like, I don't approve of this. But if you are maybe like not a US citizen or I think education is a big thing we can do too. It's here in America, I feel like we're still in it's still culturally dicey to talk about politics, especially nowadays, because politics is very divisive. But unfortunately, I think it is kind of, and I mean, there's that stereotype of like the holidays are coming up and well, the holidays are here, but there's that stereotype of the holidays are here and you don't really want to you always have that one crazy uncle who believes the opposite of whatever you believe. But I think this is really the time to find that common ground and to find that like, because I've had a lot of success with that with people of even if they're on the opposite side of the aisle of finding like something we agree on and then building from that. Like, okay, we agree with the Section 230 thing, for example. Like, not to go off on a rant on this, but like Section 230 is about the idea is currently platforms are not completely, but largely not responsible. If I go onto Twitter and I post a tweet that says something outrageous, I'm not going to use an example because I don't want to get us like in trouble on YouTube. But if I post something completely insane, right now Twitter is not responsible for that, but I am. And to me, that would be a good starting point. Like that makes sense, right? I should be responsible as the person who made that tweet. So let's build from that. That means that Section 230 does not need to be repealed. Does it need an update? I don't know, maybe. But I think to find that common ground and start building from there. And where I'm going with that is to kind of raise awareness with your friends and family. Find that common ground that you guys agree on and say, these are why these laws are bad. And this is why they're not the right solution. Do we need a solution? Maybe we can have that discussion, but this is certainly not it. And it's going to have too many bad effects. So yeah, other than contacting your politicians, just spreading the word, having those conversations, trying to have them in a civil manner where you guys come at it as like, it's not me versus you, it's us versus this problem, and trying to find that common ground and just generally spreading awareness to friends and family, especially again, if you're not in the US, but you know people in the US, make sure they know about this and what they can do. That's what I
And
recommend.
guys, for your information, the bills are currently being discussed in Congress right now. There's quite a lot,
Mhm.
so we don't blame you for not necessarily remembering them. But if you just want to keep a note on it, like there's quite a few. Right now, the most important one is probably COSA or to keep the COSA Act. There's the Screens Act, and there's also the App Store Accountability Act or ASA.
Mhm.
Just remember those three bills, and then when you do like discuss it with your friends and family members on the holiday dining table, just make sure if you share a few news articles, and maybe share some news about countries from all around the world which have already implemented age verification, and just have the wonderful pivot into across the Atlantic Ocean into the UK. We see an example of which there isn't particularly much holiday spirit right now, in which the UK is back in a drawing board trying to make things even worse with the recently passed Online Safety Act. So just for a context right here, I just want to emphasize that a lot of people do not like the Online Safety Act. At least 500,000 signatures on a recall petition has been signed, and it's kind of like bothering Parliament right now, and they're being forced to kind of like debate it over and over again. At least like as of this week, and it appears that they're instead of using it to actually recall it, apparently I think they're using it to implement even worse things into the bill and potentially expand the scope of the bill even further. And this past week, there are potentially three articles. We had to coalesce into one right now. The first one, apparently, some MPs got really pissed off that they're currently still talking about the Online Safety Act. They're now targeting VPNs apparently in the latest debate. So on this article by Tech Radar, there's a quote I just want to share with you right now pretty quickly. The onus should be on the VPN company to comply with the law. Scary, right? I'm just going to read this right now. MPs are considering whether VPN providers should be forced to implement age verification measures to prevent children from bypassing the Online Safety Act. In a debate scheduled to discuss public opposition to the legislation, MPs used the opportunity to argue for stricter rules on VPN use instead. Many Brits have turned to the best VPN apps. It sounds a little marketing here, since mandatory age verification was implemented in July. While evidence suggests the majority of these are adults looking to protect their online privacy, lawmakers are instead concerned about children using the software to dodge restrictions designed to protect them. Peter Fortune, a Conservative MP for Bromley and Biggin Hill, asked the House, does the minister agree that for the Online Safety Act to be successful, the use of VPNs has to be examined further? Echoing Fortune's remark, Labour MP Jim Mahan argued that VPN companies should be responsible for preventing children from evading checks. Why are VPNs not in scope of the legislation to ensure they're compliant with the age verification measures? He asked. And unfortunately, just I want to emphasize that the current government, specifically the UK's Minister for Digital Government and Data, Ian Murray, reassured that the government has already acted and will act against VPN providers not complying. Right now, they're just monitoring VPN usage, just collecting data, writing their fancy reports. But we don't actually know whether or not like VPN providers in the UK must actually implement age verification restrictions, which is incredibly scary. And this follows another bill by the UK House of Lords, which is the upper house of their parliament, which seeks to ban VPNs entirely for children, and which Windscribe, which is a Canadian VPN company, called the dumbest fix possible. Now, we obviously have quite a few articles in this like UK drama right now, but I was just wondering, Nate, do you have any like first thoughts on this? Do you agree with the Windscribe CEO, in which banning VPNs for children being a dumb mistake?
Yeah, I do. There's a lot of reasons. I mean, for one, and this is kind of nitpicky, but like a blanket ban of VPNs would apply to not just commercial VPNs like Proton and Mulvad, but it would also apply to like, connecting for work. Like at my last job, we were issued work computers and we were usually out on site. We weren't usually in the office. So a lot of the time to do anything like change our passwords or and there was some other stuff too, but certain things we had to connect to the work VPN to do that, since we weren't on site. So things like that, which are extremely common in the commercial space, would definitely run afoul of that. I think it's also I don't know, like I feel like we've discussed this before. Or I've definitely heard this argument made a lot lately, but like banning VPNs, like China does that, Russia did that recently. Like I don't know if it's really the smartest idea to be lumping ourselves in, us being like the Western quote unquote free democratic countries. Is it really a good idea to be following the move of all these like authoritarian regimes that are notorious for doing this kind of stuff? So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's also real quick, there's also the argument that we hear all the time, which I agree with, that if we make these tools illegal, people are just going to go to other tools that are not protecting their safety. And this is a perfect example. If they say, okay, VPNs have to start, I think there was a quote in here about like VPNs should be age gating their users. Well, underage users are just going to go to other VPNs that aren't doing that. And right now, people are already flocking to free VPNs, which usually turn out to be scams that are selling your data or worse. So yeah, I think this is gonna it objectively will make people less safe by pushing them towards less safe options. So
I just don't know like what to do personally because I remember when I was in secondary school. I recall using free VPNs constantly just to circumvent like restrictions that my school had on VPN usage. And as you may know, that's not particularly smart of me. Like 10 years ago, it's it's so sad to see like free VPN usage being almost normalized in the UK. And if any sense, it's kind of like okay, there's these like very well established like providers, Mulvad, Proton, uh, any other recommendations we may have, like they will probably
IVPN,
have
yeah.
IVPN. Yes, forgot about that one. But those three providers will not sell your data, but they're more likely to actually either comply with the age verification requirement or exit the UK market completely, which is probably devastating for vast majority of adults, for example, who generally do use it to protect their privacy and not have to comply with these horrendous age verification mandates. So it's just like it seems like people don't really understand that when you're making public policy, you have to acknowledge the circumvention will happen, right? And while these lawmakers be like, okay, we get it, people won't will be circumventing with the VPN and so forth. By banning VPNs, you're just pushing people to use more unsafe options that will not comply with the law in the first place. So it's kind of like this matter. If people want to protect their privacy, why not just let people protect their privacy in the first place?
Uh, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I was double checking, part of the article.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just like I guess I was going more of like on a bit of a rant here, It's like it's just
Gotcha.
frustrating to me. It's like, okay, like people are gonna circumvent it anyways. Why make it harder for them? You're just gonna put them more in risk. And I think it's a lot of
Yeah.
problem that lawmakers have nowadays.
Yeah, it's
But
definitely one of the podcasts I listen to, he one of the hosts regularly makes the joke that should people who don't understand email be in charge of making laws regarding email? And I feel like that's really what a lot of these tech laws come down to is, and not to be rude, because I think some politicians are really trying. They are trying. They just don't understand this technology, so they don't understand that. Oh, well, let's just ban VPNs. That'll solve the problem. And it's almost like the classic story of a lot of invasive species is you introduce one invasive species to solve a problem, and then all of a sudden that thing is now running rampant. So you need to introduce another one to tame that one, and it just yeah. It's constant band-aids is what I'm getting at. It's like they constantly just layer band-aids on top of each other.
yeah, it seems to me like really hope these people when if they do decide to implement a VPN ban, at least they make a differentiation between like consumer faced VPNs and actual enterprise VPNs because at the end of the day, a VPN is just a connection method. It's how you connect to a server remotely, just like any other methods out there. So it's kind of like, okay, I really hope they make that distinction, or if not, it'll just devastate, every single like industry out there in the UK. But hopefully they're smart enough to do that, right? I don't know. I'm not confident right now, like based on what I know about House of Lords. Anyways, I think it's a really good like pivot to the second story, just away from I guess the VPN ban question mark, and more so into a potential proposal by the UK Home Office to, you know, implement nudity blocking systems on, Apple and Android phones. So once again, I'm just gonna like quickly read through this Ars Technica article right here. Um, Essentially, like what we're seeing here is a report, right? And this report was initially like, covered by the Financial Times, written by the Home Office, which is the specific ministry in the UK that deals with interior security. So for folks out there, like focus on like the domestic law enforcement side of things. This is where the report is being written by. Um, and I'm just going to read this quote out now. The UK government wants technology companies to block explicit images on phones and computers by default to protect children, with adults having to verify their age and to access such content, the FT report said. Ministers want the likes of Apple and Google to incorporate nudity detection algorithms into their device operating systems to prevent users taking photos or sharing images of genitalia unless they're verified as adults. If the UK gets its way, operating systems like iOS and Android prevent any nudity from being displayed on a screen unless the user has verified they're an adult through methods such as biometric checks or official ID. Child sex offenders will be required to keep such blockers enabled, says Home Office, which has initially focused on mobile devices, but their push could actually expand to desktops for crying out loud. And apparently, these same officials in a report said that Microsoft can already scan for inappropriate content in Microsoft Teams, which is absolutely absurd. I just want to like make it clear it's just because there's like some form of service to like scan, let's say for illegal content or nudity on a dedicated messaging or communications app, right? Such as WhatsApp, iMessage, Microsoft Teams, Zoom. Like as much as we hate those type of things, like at least we recognize that okay, it's feasible at least to implement it. Not saying it's good, but to implement it on a device level, on smartphones and desktops, it's just I feel like at that point, like they're actually touching on a lot of other things as well, such as banning customized operating systems because they will refuse to do so by default. Um, or they're trying to look for so much invasive procedures instead of actually doing their jobs and catching, these predators in the first place. It makes me feel kind of sick. But yeah, Nate, I was just wondering though, like, would you feel like if this is ever like required to be installed on someone's phone, though, do you feel like it could potentially be misused in some way? I know we kind of talked about chat control in the past and how it could potentially be misused. I was wondering though, would a very blanket nudity detection like, algorithm could be used for that?
I mean, I feel like the answer is yes. I just can't think of how. We covered in the past when Apple was thinking about rolling out. Man, I forget what they called it, but they wanted to do. Oh, they wanted to do like client side scanning for illicit content like CSAM, and the they ended up not doing it because one of the pushback was like, well, what happens when a government pressures you to like scan for people who are at a certain protest or something like that? And they ultimately decided, at least the public facing version of the story, I don't know if there's like an unofficial one, but the public version of the story was that they ultimately decided they couldn't do it in a way where they couldn't ensure that that kind of abuse wouldn't happen. So they ultimately decided not to do it. And I feel like it's got to be the same here. I think, yeah, I mean, this is a really it's really weird story. Like to just blanket do that to everyone's phone, to require everyone to age verify just to use their phone. Um, I don't know. Apple, I feel like Apple especially has already put in a lot of protections like they have if it is a minor account, then they have all these like things are blurred by default. You can report something that makes you uncomfortable. I don't have any kids, so this is all kind of off the top of my head. I apologize if I'm like oversimplifying some of these protections, but and yeah, you have to opt into that by saying that it's a child's account, but at the same time, like I don't know, this feels to me this feels very much like I'm not and I mean, I guess I am a little bit. This feels a little bit like the government trying to overparent and think for the users and think for people. And I think there's a line. We are big fans of like things should be private by default. I was actually talking about Signal with somebody today who is currently using Signal. They are well, yeah, basically they're in a situation where they're using Signal for work and they were like, "Yeah, as soon as this job's done, I'm deleting Signal." And I'm like, "Well, you shouldn't. Like you're already using it. Signal's great." And I kind of went off on this little rant where I was making the argument that I'm like, the only way Signal could be more user friendly is if it came preloaded on your phone and ready to use. Like, and you know this because you've been using it for months now, talking to me with no problem. And so it's, that's the kind of privacy by default that it would be nice to see. Like iMessage obviously could be a lot better. We're not huge fans of iMessage necessarily, but iMessage is secure. It's end-to-end encrypted by default. People don't have to think about it. They don't have to go in and turn it on. And so I understand that on the one hand, we want these things that protect people by default. You don't have to opt into a child's account, but also like this is taking a lot of agency away from adults. And it's going one step further. It'd be one thing if they said, okay, we're going to, by default, all NSFW images are going to be blurred. Go into your settings to turn it off. But now they're saying, no, you actually have to like age verify to turn this stuff off. If I remember correctly, it's,
Yeah, it's like
oh,
it's insane because I remember like at least reading through this article, like what they're saying is not okay, you can't send or receive like nudity, right? That's not what it is proposing. It's proposing that you can't even take pictures of it, right? So something in the camera app must able to detect, okay, this is genitalia, you can take a picture of your genitalia. And I'm just actually very curious because I haven't read the full report yet. Is it will it just block you from just accessing like, adult websites, like or like websites that may consider like, not safe for work? Because it seems to me like the extent of this blocking is incredibly invasive. And so we recognize here that yes, the strengths of defaults are very important. Something like iMessage is encrypted by default. Therefore, it's generally speaking more of a safety blanket towards like the vast majority of Apple users, for example, even if it's not necessary as create a signal, right? But I feel like this is even worse than chat control, because it kind of expands it from beyond the messages into, okay, well, everything you do on your phone, if there's any single way possible to actually see an explicit image or you take it yourself, you can't even do that. So I think right now, what we're seeing is a totalitarian solution to say, okay, we'll protect everyone by default, right? But I don't really think about, okay, how can these defaults actually harm people, for example? Um, just because you are, for example, like an adult, but you don't want to give your data to the government, it means I can't even take pictures of of myself, or like to see do the access to content I want. I think it's so incredibly disgusting to see that, okay, parentification is the default here, when in reality parentification should be based on individuals.
Yeah, it somebody actually beat me to it and mentioned here in the live chat that this reminds me of the story, on the topic of ways that this could go wrong. There was a story a few years ago in the New York Times about a guy who his child, like toddler age, preschool, somewhere very very young child, his son was developing some kind of rash around his genital area, and the guy talked to his doctor, and this was like, I want to say this was during lockdown. So the doctor was like, tell you what, take some pictures of it, keep an eye on it, see if it gets bigger, and then, if it gets worse, come in and see me. And so the dude started taking pictures of his kid. And because it was an Android phone, it was auto synced to Google Drive. Google uploaded it, or it automatically uploaded to Google. Google flagged it and shut down his account and sent everything to the cops. The cops, this is the part where the story gets even worse. The cops investigated, found that everything was above board. This was a false, not really a false positive, but like there was some context missing, said no biggie. They even told Google, like, hey, we investigated this guy, he's cleared. And Google said, no, we're still going to leave his account turned off. And they wouldn't, the cops actually had to send the dude's contents of his Google Drive back to him because Google wouldn't unfreeze. Like, they wouldn't even give him his data. They were just like, no, go kick rocks. And the cops were just like, man, that's messed up. Like, here's everything they sent us. Hope that helps. And yeah, so I mean, this is like this, and there's always going to be people who slip through the cracks of any given law, right? Like, there's always going to be those niche situations that we can't foresee in advance. But at the same time, this seems like I've used this phrase before and I forget where I heard it. It's like using a machete when you need a scalpel. And it's to me, it's just the laziest possible solution. It's like you said, like they're not going after like, can we get better investigative techniques, which for the record, that would probably translate to surveillance software. But can we, is there something we can give the cops that'll make their job easier to find these people? Is there something we can do to like strengthen the laws where it's easier to prosecute these people? It's like, no, let's just go to the phone. Let's just go to like the lowest level where it's the easiest possible solution. That's the least amount of work, even though it's going to screw over everybody. And, 99% of people who are just law abiding citizens. And I didn't say this earlier, but one thing that jumped out at me is they said child sex offenders would be required to keep such blockers enabled. And it's like, okay, but is that like our current here in America? It's like a pinky promise, like when you move into a neighborhood, you're supposed to register. And it's like, I wonder how many of them actually do that. I know, I could be wrong, but I think here in America, they're actually supposed to like go around and knock on people's doors. But there's websites where you can look up and see how many registered offenders are in my area. Every time I do that, there's a lot of them. And I don't remember any of them ever knocking on my door. So I have to wonder how effective this stuff would actually be. And I just want to
Yeah.
mention real quick, Jonah said in the chat that privacy shouldn't only be for people who can figure out how to have it. And I think that was in response to my comment about like, if it was enabled by default and you could turn it off, like he's right. I'm kind of thinking of like a better way they could implement this that wasn't just like the worst possible solution. But even that's not a great solution because again, it should be user friendly and this is not.
Yeah, I think like by default, they just want this to be owned by the state. I think there's a lot of malicious intent here, because remember the Home Office wrote this report, right? I think for us Americans, probably something like, what if the FBI or the Department of Justice wrote the like report on it, right? So we've got to think about any potential motivations that might make them to want to actually implement more of these like trends into our phones. And I think there's another like article here I should discussed about Signal on WhatsApp that is actually just as important. Here we're seeing a little more of a level of abstraction. Now we're seeing like a independent reviewer of state threats legislation and reviewer of terrorism legislation, named by the name of Jonathan Hall, KC. He is affiliated with the UK's Home Office, and he wrote an independent report, which is upstandingly independent. But what he essentially did was he labeled, you know, private by design apps such as Signal and potentially like WhatsApp as potential threats to the government. And developers that actually create applications that seek to implement some form of end-to-end encryption or privacy by design um, as a formal hostile activity. And so like this like independent watchdog here, in this report, he essentially said that these developers of apps like Signal WhatsApp could fall under the legal definition of hostile activity simply because the technology makes it more difficult for UK security intelligence agencies to monitor communications. He writes that it is a reasonable assumption that this would be in the interest of a foreign state, even if though the foreign state has never contemplated this potential advantage. The report also notes that journalists carrying confidential information or material personally embarrassing to the prime minister on the eve of important treaty negotiations could face similar scrutiny. While it remains to see how this will influence future amendments, it comes at a time of increasing pressure from lawmakers against encryption. So I think right now, like, even though this guy is not officially like, related to the British government, I think it directly confirmed a lot of these internal motivations here, right? There's probably an incident where Prime Minister Starmer got embarrassed by a leaked story. Maybe some journalists like had some dirt on him before, some important negotiations, and he felt like, okay, the UK law firm should actually personally focus on, looking into unencrypted communications, right? Like, this is the thing though. It's like all of these things, like they hide behind the classic examples of, okay, we must prevent CSAM, must prevent cybercrime. When in actuality, a lot of them just personally embarrassed by some of the things that, maybe dig up by a free press. And so it makes it's kind of see is like how attacks on encryption, attacks on private by design apps are really just like attack on the free press in a lot of ways. Because right now we're trying to see the normalization of this behavior by the government and ostensibly independent watchdog agencies, when in reality, like all these like excuses about sex offenders and cybercrime is just an excuse for them to actually suppress on free speech and free press at all.
Yeah, I agree. The article specifically says the report notes that journalists carrying confidential information or material personally embarrassing to the prime minister on the eve of important treaty negotiations could face similar scrutiny. And it's like, what's that sarcastic like? Oh, you said the quiet part out loud, and it's and I mean it's really hard to argue when they straight up say that when they straight up say like, oh well, we're also going to include people that make us look bad or that call us out on things. And that's again, man, like I hate to do the like comparison to repressive countries because it feels so like it feels like one of those things that people just do. They just throw it out there. Like there's that stereotype of like you're arguing with somebody you disagree with online, which is probably your first mistake, and they're like, oh, you're worse than Hitler, and it's like, oh, come on, really, that's the best you get. Like we always have to go there, and but at the same time, like yeah, that is literally like what repressive countries do is if you post anything that contradicts the party line that makes politicians I mean there's a rapper in Spain. I'd have to go dig up who it is, but I remember I researched this very heavily for an unrelated project. There's a rapper in Spain who got sent to jail because he criticized the king of Spain. And literally his criticism was he made a rap song that was literally just a list of all the king's scandals. Like that's all he did. Like imagine if I made a song where all I did was list like all of Trump's scandals and they sent me to jail. Like that's literally what happened. And this is the kind of thing they're saying is like, oh, we need to ban encryption because we need to know if people are going to make us look bad. And it's just the UK is
It's
not okay
so
right now, man.
It's not okay, no, like, I actually wanna comment on, like, like, obviously, we have a very, interesting, title headliner today, "The West is destroying the Internet," and, we started with the US, we started with the UK, and, like, the reason why we actually created this was, like, why are all the every single country out there trying to implement these laws? And it's such a disturbing trend to see it. And while the UK may be seen as like a bit of an important contributor to this trend, it's going to spread across the West. We know it. Like the UK just simply saying the quiet part out loud for what all these politicians and those in power really want, which is to monitor our communications and not for you to not actually like actually keep them accountable. It's like it's insane to see like, okay, if I'm a politician, I can do whatever I want to extend the meaning of what cybercrime is, right? I can go ahead and say, hey, that rapper, you just literally just rapped the entirety of the King scandals. You are in violation of our libel laws. You're going to jail. Might not seem like a privacy issue at first until the government really wants to know what you think of the King scandals in your private chats. You see, like you notice here, like since laws against libel already exists in like every single country out there, we know that these tools will be repurposed against you eventually. So please, if you're in the chat right now, just make sure to read up more on these age verification laws, not necessarily just in the UK or the US, but out in your own country and see, okay, what's actually going on right now? What can I do to stop it? Are the laws impacting me right now? And what can I do to actually build a movement to actually, build a response towards these horrible age verification mandates? Um, but yeah, Nate, I was just wondering though, like before we move on to like our next country in the West, do you have any like final like comments for the UK?
No, um, I mean, nothing you didn't already say. Just yeah, it's kind of silly because encrypted communications. I was thinking while you were talking about like, sure, technology changes, times change. It is important to update our laws and make sure they're staying current. But at the same time, how is you and me having an encrypted chat on Signal where I say like, man, I really don't like the current administration? How is that any different than back in the analog days when you and me would get together at a bar and sit there over drinks and be like, man, I don't like the current administration? Like, nothing has fundamentally changed. The FBI didn't sit at every single bar table in every single conversation back then. And it's kind of, I feel like, I guess the point I'm making is like, it is important to make sure laws are updated, but this is clearly like, it's not updating to make sure the laws stay current. It's just a needless attack on privacy because we've always had conversations the government couldn't access. And, it's just, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy indeed, man. But hey, you know what? On the bright side though, if you're in the UK right now and you're having a conversation in a pub, would you want that conversation to be broadcast to the entire world? What's the difference between that and just texting someone on iMessage, for crying out loud? But
Yeah.
anyways, I think we did already mention that, with our past article about like privacy by design. I think Nate, like I think it's a wonderful segment to actually talk about, something that's happening in the US actually. About something about Samurai Wallet. I heard that it has been an ongoing story for quite some time, but yesterday there was a bit of an escalation. I was wondering, give us any insights on that?
Sure. Real quick, before we jump into that, I do want to mention some people in the chat. A couple people, Nisuria and Resplendent 606, said that while we were talking, they actually went ahead and sent letters to their politicians. Well, Nisuria said, thank you for making the video about these laws and for raising awareness. And Resplendent said they went ahead and messaged a couple of their politicians. So thank you guys for taking action and being part of that. We really appreciate you guys. Yeah. On that note, let's talk about Samourai Wallet. So this is a very complicated story, and I don't like being contrarian for the sake of it, but I do feel like there's a lot of nuance here that has been missing from a lot of the reporting that I've been seeing. But let's go ahead and go back to the beginning. So for those who don't know, Samourai Wallet was a Bitcoin wallet. I actually used Samourai Wallet. I really liked Samourai Wallet. It came with a feature called Whirlpool, which was a Bitcoin mixer. And for those who don't know, Bitcoin is not actually anonymous. Mostly, not entirely, but mostly because 99 times out of 100, the way people get Bitcoin is they go to an exchange like Coinbase or crypto.com and they hand over their ID for KYC, which is know your customer and anti-money laundering laws. And then Bitcoin can actually be very easily traced on the blockchain. So if I go to crypto.com and I buy a bunch of Bitcoin and I send a donation to Privacy Guides or something, they can very easily trace that Bitcoin as it goes to Privacy Guides. And then if we spend it on I don't know, like a Molvad subscription or something, like, I don't know. That was just the first thing that came to mind. It's people who accept Bitcoin. So there are mixers out there like Samourai Wallet's Whirlpool that will go ahead and I mean, it literally does it. Imagine throwing all your Bitcoin in a washing machine where it tumbles around and now you just reach in and grab one and it breaks that link and it makes it harder to trace. So a couple of years ago, if I remember correctly, it was relatively recent, the developers of Samourai Wallet were arrested. And they were arrested on claims of, oh my God, what was the exact claim? Basically, the claim was that they were knowingly doing money laundering for criminals. And this is where things start to get a little bit complicated because so what ended up happening what we know for sure happened is this case dragged out for a couple years, as it does. Legal cases tend to be very slow. And eventually, the developers did take a plea deal. And because of that plea deal, we kind of only have we don't have the same level of information as we would if it had actually gone to trial. So we have the Justice Department put out a couple of statements, and then actually recently, one of the developers has been doing a lot of interviews and going public with their stories. Which somebody just mentioned in the chat, Naomi Brockwell's interview with Keone, I think his name is Keone, maybe Rodriguez. That was the one I saw. I know he was also on the hated one, and there was another one that he did an interview with. So those are kind of all we know. Again, we don't have the actual court documents, we don't have the actual evidence. We just have both sides of the story. So, yeah. So what happened here is they took the plea deal because, well, okay, here's where we start getting into different sides of the story. So according to the Justice Department, which let me see if I can pull these up real quick. They claim, again, that these developers were knowingly basically marketing to criminals. Like, it was in their slides when they were trying to get investors that they said we would our target audience is like the black market or the gray market. They claim that these people went on Dread, which is like it's like a darknet version of Reddit, and they were openly trying to get known cyber criminals to come use their service. What were some of the other things here? They say that they described Whirlpool as, quote, money laundering for Bitcoin, things of that nature. And if you go listen to these interviews with Keone, I swear I thought it said it was, I swear I thought I heard his name pronounced as Keone, but somebody told me it was Keone, so I apologize if I'm getting it wrong. If you go and listen to him, his version of the story, which I do believe to an extent for the record, is that it was all taken out of context. Like, one of the tweets that they cited as evidence was when Russia was sanctioned, he tweeted and he was like, "Oh, welcome all Russian oligarchs to use our service," or something like that. Something similar to that. And he pointed out in his interview with Naomi Brockwell, he's like, "Well, first of all, why would we have tweeted that in English if we were serious? And second, how many Russian oligarchs are investing in Bitcoin to hide their money? Like, they're buying investment properties in London, in Dubai. Like, they're not using Whirlpool. They're not using Bitcoin." So yeah, I think this is a really complicated case. To kind of bring it back to the current day, Keone is going to jail, actually reported to jail today, unfortunately. And I believe his co-developer is supposed to report in January. And again, to agree with him in his interview with Naomi, it does sound like the judge really had it out for him. Like, she didn't even let him have like one more holiday with his family. Well, he got Thanksgiving, but he didn't get Christmas. And according to him, like, this whole trial has put them like $6 million in the hole. And then the judge added another like $250,000 fine on top of that, which is just insult to injury. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty heavy handed, but they took the plea deal because, and again, one of his really good points, he's like, we don't have infinite money to just go up against the US government. They can just keep doing this. We're already $6 million in the hole. And then if we went to trial and lost, we would have to appeal, which would be millions of more dollars. And, you know, somebody like Amazon or Facebook, sure, they got lawyers all day. They make $6 million a minute. They don't care. But for an individual, that is a lot of money. So they felt that unfortunately, doing the prisoner's dilemma and the smart move was to just go ahead and take the plea deal and get 5 years instead of 25 plus. And yeah, I definitely cannot blame them for that math. I probably would have done the same thing, to be completely honest. But yeah, I say it's a little bit of a complicated case because I don't necessarily want to sound like I'm victim blaming here, like I'm being heartless, because it really is tragic. Like, I really do feel bad for the guy. I really did feel bad. Like, he didn't kill anybody or anything like that, but you know, it sounds like they really were going out and making some questionable marketing decisions at best. And, you know, yeah, I don't know. It's really unfortunate. And I think I don't think the government's goal was to attack all these open source projects necessarily. I think it was certainly a plus for them, but we are seeing the government go after some other mixers. Tornado Cash was one that we've talked about when we were discussing the story. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of the story and my thoughts bringing us up to now. One thing that's worth mentioning is they are trying to get President Trump, to issue a pardon. And Trump did say that he's keeping an eye on the story. and he kind of made a little offhand remark. He's like, I don't know, do you think I should pardon him, to the reporter who asked him about it? And so he said, I don't know anything about it, but we'll take a look. And he did pardon Ross Ulbricht earlier this year. Yeah, that was this year, I think. So it's definitely a nuanced story for sure. A very unfortunate story. My heart really goes out to that dude. It's unfortunate, but yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's kind
it's
of
really
brings us up to where we are.
it's really sad to like see this story come up, especially when like I said, we don't want to victim blame, of course. Like
Mhm.
obviously that's be horrible. But
Yeah.
that kind of begs the question though, how come services like Monero or Tor, how come they're not usually as affected by law enforcement? Is it the way that they're designed that make it more resistant towards these type of, like litigation attempts? Or is it just like the fact is they don't actually advertise themselves directly to criminals? Like what's the reason why they aren't targeted, but something like Samurai was targeted by law enforcement?
Well, I think there's a few reasons. To be honest, one I think is marketing. Tor specifically markets themselves towards activists and journalists, and they're not geared towards. Not to get too off topic, but I am a big fan of what's his name, John Oliver. But he did an episode on Monero, and I felt like he really did Monero dirty. Or he did an episode on cryptocurrency specifically, and I felt like he really did Monero dirty because he's like, "Oh, we know you're obviously catering to criminals," and I'm like, "Did we look at the same website, bro?" But yeah, but no, I think the bigger thing is like privacy by design. Like Monero and Tor, they are designed specifically with privacy for everyone, and that kind of goes back to what I said. Like they're not there to, it's money laundering for Bitcoin. It's like, no, it's everyone is private, journalists, activists, people who just want to stay private online, and unfortunately we do have, bad people who will abuse those services. We know that, like we have people who abuse Session and Signal but when you're casting that net to make privacy for everyone, then that that really that really makes it harder for the government to argue that you're doing something illegal. And there's also, I do want it to be noted, there's a little bit of a decentralization to it as well. From what I understand, Whirlpool was a very heavily centralized service. There weren't like multiple Whirlpool servers. It was like their thing that they were running. So it's a lot easier to pin it on them as opposed to something like Monero and Tor, where there's nodes being run all over the world and it's harder to go out and arrest every single operator.
Hmm. Yeah, that definitely does make sense though, because it seems to me that, you know, with Samurai, they really wanted to be the one-stop shop for this type of material. And unfortunately, that brings a lot of liability issues that, just two men can't really deal with, like especially with $6 million in the hole and all of that.
Yeah, that's
But
insane.
it's horrible. But I want to actually discuss kind of like a predecessor situation a bit, with Tornado Cash, which I would believe is the first major instance in which an open source project was targeted by law enforcement for facilitating money laundering. If I remember properly, Tornado Cash was a cryptocurrency tumbler for Ethereum, right? And I recall when I was reading up about it, right? The EFF lambasted this decision to blacklist them by the Department of Justice by saying there was an attack on free speech, especially the right to publish, open source code. And I'm just wondering though, do you agree on whether publishing open source code is a marker of free speech? Do you feel like the people in Samurai are being punished for just simply publishing code freely for others to use?
Um, to clarify, Samurai or Tornado in your last question there?
Samurai specific, because it seems like us,
Okay.
the EFF used that analogy for Tornado Cash, and I was wondering if you believe that, Samurai is actually, it's also a freedom of speech issue as well.
I mean, I definitely think this is my personal opinion. Based on the information I have right now, I do feel like Samurai, like the judge was really heavy-handed on them. I don't know. I don't think they deserved necessarily that much. But again, that's based on the information I have right now. I don't know if like in a few days I'm gonna find out like, oh, they tried to hire a hitman. Like, ooh, yikes. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's weird because the EFF, one of their early landmark cases is that code is free speech. I believe it was centered around PGP. Actually, the government tried to regulate PGP the same way that they would regulate any kind of arms, like guns and missiles and Like if you sell a crate of missiles to, I'm trying not to pick the most obvious country. We'll say France. I don't know why France, but we're going to sell a crate of missiles to France. The government has rules and regulations about how to do that deal. And they tried to do that with PGP, which, for those who don't know, is a pretty good privacy. And it's a type of encryption that largely powers most encrypted email, like Proton, Tuda. Tuda uses like a modified version of it. Um, and a lot of messengers too also use like the key exchange model. So it's very very common and very powerful encryption. And the EFF took the government to court and said like, no, code is speech. And I think the example they used was like, if they printed the code in a book, could you pull that book? Or if they printed it on like T-shirts, kind of like we have a shirt. I'm not wearing it today, but we have a shirt that has like Article 12 printed on it from the UN's Declaration of Human Rights. So and they ultimately got the court to agree with them and say, like, yeah, somebody publishing code is the same as like writing a book or making a movie. Like, it's free speech, it's an expression of self. And I think the Tornado Cash example kind of went a lot further than Samurai is, because in the case of Samurai, and I could be wrong here, it's a lot of catching up to do. Like I said, this is a long court case, and I may have forgotten some of the finer details. But in the case of Samurai, they went after the developers specifically and attacked the developers and said you committed conspiracy. In the case of Tornado Cash, they actually like sanctioned the code, and I think GitHub even pulled the code down for a while. And it's just like they went the it says here on Wikipedia the protocol itself was blacklisted, which is, imagine if like the Signal protocol was blacklisted, like WhatsApp would stop working, Facebook's encrypted messages would stop working. I think maybe iMessage, or maybe they use their own protocol, but I mean, that's pretty heavy handed. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of similarities, and I think they both started happening around the same time. But, um, yeah, to my knowledge, there are some key differences here.
Mm. Yeah, indeed. Like, I think because usually what happens if you're a private company, right? And you're a limited liability company, you're not, when you get sued or you do face criminal charges, most likely it usually faces the company, not necessarily individuals. So it's just fascinating to see what essentially are two people being punished for the code they published online. And yes, there's obviously a lot of nuance here. For example, they apparently upgraded a server that mixed a lot of these transactions together, and it causes a lot of like issues. Like, okay, you're advertising a service, and but you don't have the same liability protections as a company would, and it's just like a messy situation. And I definitely do feel like, all in all, though, like if you do desire some means of privacy with your transactions without, necessarily being, on the hook for money laundering, like perhaps don't rely on a mixing service traditionally. You definitely do want to look at a private by design service, would you say? I, it's just, it reduces a lot of the, the headache involved, kind of worry about, operating such a service. Maybe it's just best if just something like Monero is normalized a lot more than Bitcoin or Ethereum,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's really well said. It's things I mentioned earlier. It'd be nice if we lived in a world where everything was more private by design and people didn't have to go enable settings and download tools and this and that. So trying to pick those tools that are from the ground up, you don't have to make a whole lot of changes, and they're just kind of ready to go out of the box as much as possible. Definitely is the better way to go.
Yeah, yeah, it's just I don't wanna say, "Okay, like, listen, these services are obviously for money laundering," right? But for something like Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are not private by design for the record, if you had to go through the effort of using a mixing service, a tumbling service, it's at that point, it's kinda like, well, at that point, like, what are you trying to do here? Like, it's like you're just wasting your time at this point. It's so easy to trace it, and these services are just would just be on the hook by law enforcement. Like, I feel like regardless of what you do with your money, at the end of the day, it's probably best if, for example, you do use private design features. That way, less people will probably be harmed in the future, I would say. Because right now, it's clear that, with Bitcoin, Ethereum not being private design, it just pushes a lot of liability up the chain. Um, but yeah, I think like as someone who doesn't really know a lot about crypto, like I think like I learned quite a lot, like just to catch up with the case and realizing, oh wow, this is a whole other world out there, like know your customer laws, regulations, all that. It's
Mhm.
just wow, it's very extensive. And honestly, I don't like, there isn't really like a good solution for anyone involved.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I do want to point out that I think there were a lot of legitimate users of Samurai too, and
Mm,
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if anyone can say because they claim that they didn't keep any analytics on their users or log what their users were doing, and I do believe them. So it's hard to say like no, like 90% of the users just thought it was really cool technology and used it. Like I mentioned, I used it. I had my money in Whirlpool forever,
mhm.
just constantly getting mixed up. So and I honestly I haven't even spent most of the Bitcoin I have because I don't know, I just don't for some reason. But there were plenty of people I think who were probably using it for totally legitimate things, but I think yeah, the fact that it's mostly their marketing, they're going out of their way. I think there's a difference between people like Monero and Tor who say like, yes, unfortunately bad people are going to use our tools. That is an unfortunate side effect of any privacy tool. And then going out and finding those people and going, hey, you should use our tool to do your
Mm.
crimes because it's better than those guys and the tool you're currently using. Um, yeah, I mean that was definitely something I think we can all agree they should not have done. But yeah, I mean any tool is going to have bad people using it, unfortunately. And I think that's a something that the government likes to lean on is like, oh, bad people are using it, but that's kind of unavoidable with anything. Bad people use all kinds of tools all the time. We've all heard those arguments, and they're absolutely true. But yeah, so I just wanted to say that I don't want to be too hard on these guys and paint them with a bad brush of like, oh, only criminals use this thing. Like, no, there were lots of just regular privacy enthusiasts, I'm sure, who were using it too. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation for like everyone involved, I'd say. But yeah, I think like that's enough we can talk about probably about this situation. I just want to
For
add
sure.
really quickly though, is that like at the end of the day, like if you do decide to like use a cryptocurrency, we really do recommend Monero on our website. Um Mixing, while it sounds fun on paper, such a cool concept, right? But at the end of the day, it's you do want to use private design features, or else like you will experience like a lot of these potential like liability issues, as mentioned before. Just summarize really quickly, like definitely do keep to our recommendations. To stay safe out there. Anyways, I'd like to use this as a chance to move on to our next country, which is Germany, or specifically a city in Germany called Berlin. Like it's a capital city split between East and West during the Cold War, right? Um, you may have heard of something called the Stasi, which was the East German interior security, domestic security force. They're quite well known for infiltrating your homes and apartments and conducting a lot of like state-sponsored gaslighting towards their political opponents, right? It seems we're seeing a minor return of the Stasi in a form of a huge expansion of Berlin police surveillance powers, actually. Um, so we're going to look at this like website, this blog, in Reclaim.net here, and we're seeing right now is an almost unanimous decision by the governing CDU SPD coalition, supported by some AfD votes, to approve the General Security and Public Order Act, which you know focus specifically on Berlin, right, and establish limits for police, but expand its surveillance powers to include three very concerning changes, which seems to me like a return of the Stasi in a lot of ways. Um, one of the most controversial elements is the expansion of police powers under paragraph 26A and 26B. This allows investigators to hack into computers and smartphones under a banner of source telecommunications service, surveillance, and online searches. What it essentially does is it allows police in Berlin to install state-developed spyware known as Trojans on personal devices to intercept messages before or after encryption. And for, if for some reason this spyware cannot be deployed remotely, such as through a zero-day vulnerability, the law will essentially authorize the officers to secretly enter someone's home to gain access and install these programs directly on the hardware without the occupant's knowledge. Now that Berlin had previously resisted such practices and now joins other federal states that permit physical entry to install digital monitoring tools. And like right now, there's also a lot of things as well. So I'm just gonna like quickly summarize it. So, obviously, besides the fact that it maintains this list of vulnerabilities the state will use to actually, put everyone at risk, right? Just keeping these zero-day vulnerabilities a secret instead of actually disclosing them to companies to fix. What they're doing is they're also like, activating the more body camera footage, for example. What it does that it also expands cell tower queries, allowing people essentially collect data from cell tower dumps from a chosen time frame. And this form of cell tower queries can actually identify the movements of thousands of uninvolved individuals, including those who actually attended a protest. Um, I'll promise a few more as well, such as automatic license plate recognition, biometric face and voice matching using public available information on the internet, more increased like OSINT surveillance, for example. It's absurd. I'm going to stop here because reading this article just makes you like feel very, very upset for like a lot of Berliners out here, but also confused as well because apparently this a lot of the physical like entry points established in his blog has been available for other state members as well. So it isn't just a new thing introduced in Berlin, but rather across many other German states and provinces. Which for me, it sounds quite scary to know that yes, it is normal for the police to directly enter your room, enter your house, and install spyware on your like hardware. And it really reminds me. Okay, yes, the police have been informally allowed to install spyware on your phone. If there's a warrant, maybe they can send it to you, maybe they won't. It really depends on a lot of like different rules, right? There's never been a formal rule in a lot of countries where yes, you are allowed to use target spyware or not. Some countries ban it, other countries promote it, but informally, right? So I feel like bills like these seek to normalize a lot of these like mercenary spyware firms and just empower them and normalize their usage on a regular basis, which should not be the case whatsoever. Um, and secondly, though, one thing I'm also concerned about is hardware security, specifically in the lines of evil maid attacks, anti-interdiction methods as well. Because as you may know, like there's been a lot of like news developments about how like almost every single like device we have out there is actually vulnerable to evil made attacks, specifically computers. Like Nate, you probably heard of something called Spectre Meltdown back in 2018, right? Which essentially affected almost every single computer out there. Um, and that reminds me that okay, it is already a given that the police, at least in Germany, can enter your home without you knowing and install malware on your computer, right? Or maybe they'll like use Celebrate to like essentially like install something on your phone, right? Like we don't know the method. This blog doesn't really discuss the details. But what I'm concerned about is like, is there anything that people can do to actually protect themselves against it? Because like right now, at least on our website, like yeah, we do have some limited information on what people can do, such as enabling full verified boot or using like a specific operating system that does support it rather than just leaving it fully unlocked. Um, I'm just wondering though, like, how can we actually protect ourselves from these like unwarranted searches and seizures if you live in a country that does so?
So the answer is to carry a very big backpack and put every electronic device in your house, including your TV. Now, obviously, I'm kidding. Um, yeah, I mean, it's tough, man. It really is because, like you said, there are certain things that can help, but I mean, especially when you're talking about a state sponsored, like this is literally a state sponsored adversary. And to be fair, when we're talking about police, there's varying levels, right? Like here in the US, the NYPD has more funding than a lot of militaries around the world versus, the sheriff's department in Iowa that, probably doesn't even have enough money for coffee and the sheriff buys the coffee for the office every month or something. So it's really it depends on there's a lot of like it depends here when we talk about this kind of stuff. But yeah, I think this is one of the reasons that we're really big fans of like Graphene OS, for example. You can lock the bootloader, and that makes it more secure against various sorts of attacks. I'm going to be fully honest. I'm not super familiar with a lot of hardware security and hardware stuff that's built in, but I do know that newer devices are constantly adding more security features like this to help protect against tampering at a deeper level. So it, I mean, it sucks because I think, especially a lot of us who like, first of all, we talked about the RAM shortage up top. Like, I think we all want to make our devices last as long as possible right now. But also, some of us want to be like environmentally aware and not create electronic waste and stuff like that. But if you have a really high threat model, it is really important to get devices that are current, that have a lot of those safety features built in. And, they're, again, I can't speak to the efficacy of all of them because this is a little bit outside my realm of knowledge, but I know that there are things like the heads firmware. If you use certain Linux distros, it's kind of like a hardened version of Core Boot, if I remember correctly. And that is designed to protect against evil mate attacks and to alert you if I don't know if it still does, but I remember once upon a time cubes would alert you if anything had changed on the lower levels of the system. So, and I remember that because every time I would update my cubes machine, like the firmware, every time I would boot up, it would send me this big scary red message that's like, "Oh, your hashes or whatever have changed, and this could indicate compromise." And the first few times it happened, I was like, "Oh my god, what? What happened? Hold on, wait." And then I remembered I ran an update, and I'm like, "Oh, I bet it was that." And then I started to notice the pattern after a while. So yeah, it's there are certain softwares out there that can do that, but they're all not created equal. So definitely do your research on that. And if you're in doubt, ask in our forum. There's a lot of really smart people there that could probably answer your question on if this one's any good, what are any potential holes in it. But yeah,
Yeah. Like in my article, like I've actually written about like specifically if you're looking for a Cubes OS like machine, right? Right now, like yes, Heads Former does support manual installation, of course, but it seems to me that if you look through all the different like I'd say supported motherboard configurations for heads firmware. Right now, they only really support two, and all of them are from manufacturers like OEMs, specifically Purism, which is we will talk about that later, and specifically Nova Custom, right? We're based in the Netherlands. So if you're based in Germany, if you're one of the affected federal states, or such as Berlin, for example, I'm not sure if they're a federal state. Are they just a city? I don't know. I am not that
it
well
says
acknowledged.
regional parliament, so I don't know. I think they're a state.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you're affected by these, German like police surveillance measures, I highly recommend you make that Ryanair flight or that drive to the Netherlands and see, hey, like let's knock on the door on the Nova Custom folks here. Let's get this laptop out before the RAM shortage happens in 2026. You only have a few weeks left for RAM prices do increase, and right now, like even by like, regular standards, like Nova Custom laptops are quite expensive by the nature of being a customized, niche like OEM. So keep that in mind though that if you do have a high threat model, Nova Custom is at least comparably right at your doorsteps, and I'm sure they're willing to help you out with any like support you need. Um, anyways, yeah, I think it's just concerning to see that yes, there is suddenly an increased need to focus on physical security and anti-evil made mitigation. And unfortunately, when you're going against like a state level actor, it's just there's not a lot you can really do besides these measures, because at the end of the day, you can't really protect yourself against the adversary forever. So maybe it's time to focus on other things as well, such as like advocacy and preventing these laws from happening in the first place.
Yeah, agreed. I do think not to for the record, we're not affiliated with Nova Custom in any way.
Oh yeah,
Obviously,
we're
we don't
not.
take
We're
any
not.
affiliate links or anything. But I did listen to an interview recently, and I could be wrong, but I seem to remember him saying, like, yeah, if you want to make the trip to show up at our office, we will hand you the device. Like, because they do offer, you mentioned the anti-interdiction, which is where like they'll one of the common things I think Purism does this is they'll put clear nail polish on the screws so that if it gets unscrewed at any point during transit, you'll have an indicator that somebody tampered with it, right? So yeah, one thing they're like, yeah, but if you'd rather, you can just come to our office and we'll give it to you if you're in the Netherlands. But um, yeah, it's I just wanted to say, like going back to the Samurai Wallet thing, it's hard to stand up to a government. They have certainly not unlimited resources. They are still, to some degree or another, still accountable to voters, even if it's in the sense of like, oh, my politician just spent $500 billion suing this open source project I've never heard of when they could have been putting that money towards roads. Why am I going to vote for them again? But compared to you, like, the government can drop $6 million to sue me. I am not, I don't have $6,000. Like, come on, that's not a fair fight. So, yeah, it is really important to think about these kind of things in advance, for sure.
Yeah, actually, you point out something that's like really intriguing as well because like in the blog itself, it mentions that apparently it's the governing coalition of well, it's formerly two opposing parties, right? The more conservative CDU and the more center left SPD, and they're supported by the Alternative for Deutschland, right? Which is the more like
Mhm.
far right party and not in power that's currently like, in the parliament. Um, so I'm just wondering, wow, like everyone supports this no matter who you vote
Yeah.
for, like the government will screw you over no matter what. So it's just like a funny observation I noticed though. It's like if you're based in Germany, yeah, it's like it's pretty tough out there. I'm sorry, but
And it's
while your
just so
politicians may
crazy.
fail you, Oh, sorry, Nate. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's so crazy because like I think you even noted in the article says too, like Germany historically has had such good privacy laws because you mentioned the Stasi, like East Germany, West Germany, and all that kind of stuff. Like there was so much paranoia that when the Berlin Wall fell, Germany decided like we don't want to do that again. That was awful. We don't want to live in this crazy police state where like parents can't trust their kids and friends can't trust their neighbors and like it's just insane. We don't want to live in that world. And so it is mind blowing to see Germany institute these new laws where, now it's like the police can break into your house and put malware on your phone. Like, I, I forget exactly what I said, but I think I posted that in the privacy guides chat when I read that. And I was like, what did I just read? Like, that's so insane. And, just like they've got like Kevin barely scratched the surface of everything that's in here. They expand cell tower queries on every mobile phone connected during a time frame. Like America just outlawed geofence warrants and they just like put them in the express lane. Like they expanded automatic license plate recognition systems and just man, like it blows my mind. I never thought I'd see Germany doing this of all people. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
let's do away with the myth that if you're based in an EU country that you're automatically protected from a lot of these like privacy issues. Yes,
Mhm.
maybe be more protected from corporate surveillance from Google and Apple. Um, if you worry about that, of course. But if you're actually concerned about other aspects of your life, it's definitely on a per country basis. So please do not stay like calm. Like just because Germany, somewhat voted against chat control a few months ago doesn't necessarily mean that they won't put something above your computer, for example. It's you're not safe no matter where you live from these laws, and the only thing they can really do to protect yourself is actually be aware of them in the first place. Because I'm sure, like in Germany, for example, there probably wasn't a lot of like public knowledge of what this entails, since it's appears to be solely being introduced state by state in Germany, which is like reminds me of how age verification is spreading, like across the world from country to country, from each individual U.S. state to the federal level. So definitely, like it's like so important to focus on state politics, all right? Because you'll never know what will happen, until of course a law just slams you like in the face, and all of a sudden, oh wait, the police can just break into my room, like how 40 years ago the Stasi did, in Berlin. So it's kind of like, ah, the Stasi's back. Oh no, and everyone hates them. But at the end of the day, you realize the Stasi was just law enforcement. They're police at the end of the day, right? Like, what's the real difference between the Stasi and the Stasi you have today, which are modern day police officers that can access almost every information you have online, where you go based on cell phone towers, and of course the ability to go into your room and mess with you a little bit. Like that's the Stasi's favorite technique. Like deconstructing and gaslighting you by moving a chair. And now, like, what's the difference between that and just like going to someone's random home and just bugging your desktop? So yeah, it's just I'm sorry, Germany. Like it's just it's so tough like to see all this like come back again. Like learn your lesson.
I do want to add one thing there, maybe on a positive note, is the article did say at the very end that it's unclear if this is going to stand up to what did they say? Whether it withstands constitutional review will determine how far Germany's commitment to individual privacy can bend in the name of security. So, in other words, there is still a chance that somebody could bring this up to the courts and say, "Hey, this is not constitutional." And I don't know anything about Germany's constitution, so I can't speak to that. But if any of our listeners are German and happen to know some lawyers, like definitely bring this up and be like, "Hey, is there a case here? Because this is wild." So
Yeah,
yeah.
I really please let us know because I don't think like I'm pretty sure we do have bad people in Germany like on our community. So if you do
Oh,
have
I'm
any
sure.
thoughts, please do share like on our like, community forum as well. If you have any thoughts on what people could potentially do in reaction to this, maybe like we can sue them. Perhaps we can take some short term temporary protective measures against yourself. Secure your devices. Um, but yeah, like please like if you have any thoughts on this, please let us know because right now we're just two Americans sitting across the ocean, no idea what's going on in Germany right now. Like this was
Yeah.
shocking for us. Maybe you already know about this for quite some time. Um, but yeah, like I think like Nate, I think it's time to go back to our usual suspect in America. Like Firefox. I feel like we talk about him so much.
Yeah.
It's always something about AI.
Yeah. Mozilla's been busy on Firefox, and I'm a little disappointed because up until now, I feel like Mozilla's been making So Mozilla got a new CEO, or their old CEO stepped down. They had an interim CEO, and basically they said a bunch of stuff about like we're going to recommit to Firefox. We're going to focus on. They shut down some of their other projects, which some I know people were unhappy about, like Pocket. I actually saw a lot of people were upset that that got shut down, but some other things that kind of in my opinion never really made sense. Like they had a was it called Fake Spotter? It was like an extension that would detect fake reviews on a website, which, hey, I'm sure it's a cool extension, but like, why did Mozilla pick that one up? I don't know. That was weird. But anyways, they said they were going to refocus on Firefox. And for a while I felt like they were adding a bunch of like privacy focused things and like kind of doing some cool stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like I like where this is going. And then this happened. Um, So this article comes from TechCrunch, and the headline says Mozilla's new CEO says AI is coming to Firefox, but will remain a choice. Um, yeah. So quoting parts of the article here, it says Mozilla has appointed Anthony Enzor Demeo as its CEO. Before this appointment, Enzor Demeo was general manager of Firefox and is now taking over from the interim CEO, Laura Chambers, who was in the role for the past couple of years. Enzo DeMeo previously held product roles at Roofstock, Better, and Wayfair. So just to kind of give his credentials, I suppose. Mozilla will be investing in AI and will add AI features to Firefox, Enzo DeMeo said in a blog post announcing the appointment. And he said the company will make AI features optional within Firefox and its other products. I don't think that's really super news to people. I think Firefox has kind of been dabbling in AI for quite a while now, but um, yeah, I know they've had a. I don't know exactly how they've been dabbling because I'll be honest, I don't use Firefox regularly, but I do know they've kind of been dipping their toes in the water. Well, they added Perplexity as a default search engine, which is a weird choice. But yeah, as one example. So I'm actually going to go ahead and quote the blog post here where he talked about this stuff specifically. He said, as Mozilla moves forward, we will focus on becoming the trusted software company. This is not a slogan. It is a direction that guides how we build and how we grow. And it means three things. First, every product we build must give people agency in how it works. Privacy, data use, and AI must be clear and understandable. Controls must be simple. AI must always be a choice, something that people can easily turn off. People should know why a feature works the way it does and what value they get from it. Second, our business model must align with trust. We will grow through transparent monetization that people recognize and value. Third, Firefox will grow from a browser into a broader ecosystem of trusted software. Firefox will remain our anchor. It will evolve into a modern AI browser and support a portfolio of new and trusted software additions. We will measure our progress against a double bottom line. Our work must advance our mission and succeed in the market. In the next 3 years, that means investing in AI that reflects the Mozilla Manifesto, and it means diversifying revenue beyond search. So, yeah. So historically, I personally have always been a very big critic of Mozilla, and I think I'm gonna have to pick up that mantle and put that hat back on because I don't know. I don't think anybody's really gonna be thrilled about this. I have personally defended things like Proton Lumo and Braves Leo because I do think when Proton released Lumo, they made the comment that AI is coming whether we want it or not, and I think they make a really good argument that if we just dig our heels in and reject AI every single chance it gets, unfortunately, and I don't I really hate to be defeatist, but I think all that's gonna do is people are gonna be forced to use because there's some jobs where like your company tells you you have to use AI. And to be fair, they're gonna tell you like you have to use this specific AI. They're not gonna let you use Lumo or Leo. But I think we run the risk of people not having any less crappy AI choices. And I want to stress less crappy. Um, but that said, I think personally, I think Leo and Lumo have actually kind of done something. Like I don't really understand what Mozilla is bringing to this. It's I feel like Mozilla is always like a day late and a dollar short with all these features, and they're not really bringing anything new. They're just kind of catching up to everyone else and doing things that everyone else has already done. And I don't know, I don't get it. And to nitpick to be the Mozilla hater, I've got to point out that this is not how they've been operating. He says, first principle, every product we build must give people agency. Privacy, data use, and AI must be clear and understandable. Controls should be simple. Something people can turn off. People should know why a feature works the way it does and what value it gets from it. Sorry, was it earlier this year or last year that they rolled out privacy preserving advertising? And I put that in heavy quotes for any audio listeners, where it's like, they didn't even ask. They just enabled it by default, and you had to go digging through the menu to go turn it off. And it's just, it's, I don't know, maybe he's trying to say like under my leadership we're going to turn a new leaf, but this is definitely not what Mozilla has been doing historically. I hope it is what they will do going forward, but yeah, I don't know. I don't really see a reason. And also that third one, like Firefox will go from a browser into an ecosystem. Like, so you just killed all your products and now you're going to bring them all back. Is that, I don't know. I don't like it. And I want to like Firefox. I really, really, really want to like Firefox. I want to make that clear. But I mean, you go to a website like browsertests.org or whatever it is, and like Firefox is missing so many basic features that so many other browsers have, like privacy preserving features that so many other browsers have implemented. And I don't understand why they can't start there. Like, start with the basic stuff that everyone else is doing before they shove in all these features nobody asked for. I don't know. That's, yeah. I
Yeah, like
have
I
a lot
just
of
well,
complaints with Firefox.
I'm sure you do. I guess you're switching out that Santa hat for the Mozilla hating hat for now. But but just to like emphasize as well, it's like yes, like Mozilla is so far behind like other browsers, not just in terms of
Yeah.
whole AI features, whatever, but they're just so behind in just making a modern browser with basic features. I think they're like Firefox. I think they once like released a blog post saying, "Oh, we're introducing profiles for the first time." But it's really just a refinement of the system they already have with containers, if I remember properly. So it's kind of like at least with Firefox, right? They're constantly behind. There's so many security gaps available, but we also want to support them because at the end of the day, they're one of the few browsers out there that is completely independent of Google, specifically Chromium, right? And as much as like, we love like the security benefits that Chromium has, um, it's sad to see like how something like Firefox has been mismanaged for the past 10 years, and now they're suddenly behind. Like companies like Proton and Brave. And there's one other thing too that I'm really angry about. It's that this CEO of a nonprofit, mind you, talks about a business model when you're supposed to be doing something for the public good, right? So I know that we've talked about their financial crisis quite a lot, with the recent antitrust case involving Google being allowed to essentially have their search engine as a default with other browsers, right? They do this with Apple Safari. They also do that with Mozilla's Firefox. And a huge shock to many people was that this deal that Google has with Firefox is essentially a plurality, if not a majority, of their funding, at least like a few years ago, right? And right now, like what we see, is that Firefox is desperate because they know that this case will eventually um, lead to some form of like divestment, right? Like we don't know if this deal will survive. It has so in the previous antitrust case, right? But we don't know if this will be challenged again and again. Um, so relying so much on Google has already been a financial disaster for Firefox, and they're trying to diversify as much as possible, but I think we noticed from the many products developed and just didn't work out, right? Mozilla VPN or Pocket. It's just clear that they don't really know what to do, and they can't really find a sustainable like business model beyond making these deals with big tech corporations. And while I applaud like this new CEO, Enzor Demio for trying to at least diversify and recognizing the issue, I also am suspect of his focus on AI because we know that AI right now it's just you can easily use it for free, right? Will it actually be a sustainable business model for a nonprofit like Mozilla? Is it perhaps maybe time to focus on other things as well, such as, for example, expanding your grant finding the process? Because a lot of nonprofits rely on grants, right? Obviously, you're allowed to sell a product, you're allowed to monetize your product, but there's so much flip flopping on where this business model will go to the point where I'm like, you are a nonprofit. Focus on building a product that works for us and focus on the public good right now, okay? Because they're playing nonprofits with less resources than Mozilla has, and they're not as struggling as you are. So very clearly, I think the problem is not necessarily a fundraising issue or a profits issue. I think it's an identity crisis, an identity issue. You will never make money, at least sustainably, if you don't even know what you are. Like, I was just wondering if I'm like alone in this state. Like, do you feel like there is some bit of identity crisis with Firefox to prevent them from actually committing to something?
Um, Nothing that I can really remember. I do want to know Mozilla's structure is actually kind of weird because you talked about how he's talking about you know, business models and stuff, which for the record, I don't think it's a bad idea for people to have a um a sustainable business model, a way of making money. This is going to be a very polarizing take, but um I think it's a challenge. Let me put it this way. I think it's a real challenge for people to rely solely on good faith donations. I think it was Opt Out Podcast with Seth for Privacy, one of his very early ones. He interviewed a guy who has I forget his name, but he works for Citadel Dispatch or whatever. And he's like, I have this project where I take sponsors and affiliates and stuff, and I have this other project where I only do donations. And he's like, this sponsored project gets 10 times as much funding. So first of all, if you want organizations to stick around, open source tools and projects, like, please donate to them because funding is very tight. And I know that's a lot to ask right now in today's economy. But second, going back to what I was saying, Mozilla has a nonprofit section and a for-profit section, and it's really confusing. Somehow they both oversee Firefox, and I really have never fully understood how they're structured and what the funding liabilities are and stuff. I don't know. It's really weird, but yeah, apparently for what it's worth, he is the CEO of the Mozilla Corporation, which is the for-profit arm. So it kind of makes sense that he would be talking about you know, business models and revenue and stuff like that. But yeah, I do agree that like they don't seem to know what they're doing. That's also the impression I get, is that they don't really have a direction. And I mean, sure, they've got the corporate speak of like, these are our values, and it's like, okay, but what does that mean in terms of making money? What does that mean in terms of developing Firefox? What does that mean in terms of features? And it really seems like they're just playing catch up. Like it's almost like the people that are jumping into Bitcoin now and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to become a millionaire." And it's like, "No, that ship sailed." Like, you might make some money, sure, but you're not going to become a Bitcoin millionaire. Lightning doesn't strike twice. And I feel like they just keep like, "Oh, everybody's getting into AI. Let's go get into AI." And it's like, but that ship has sailed. If you're not already on the boat, you're on the shore, man. Like, it's too late for that. So, I don't know.
Yeah, indeed. Also thank you for correcting me. I guess that the structure also confused me as well. I was like, wait, just market the Mozilla Corporation and there's
It's
Mozilla
so
Foundation.
confusing.
It is confusing. It must confuse me too. But I think regardless, though, I think my point still stands on the whole.
Yeah.
We view Mozilla as a nonprofit, even though there's a subsidiary as a company. I guess this guy is the CEO of the company itself. But it's kind of like, oh Lord, we don't even know if it's a nonprofit or not. Which is the issue for Mozilla itself. It really needs to get that squared away, Because would you rather be a nonprofit that, isn't making that much money, but still is developing a decent product compared to a failing company that doesn't even know what it's trying to do to make money? What's better? I feel like the first one's better, isn't it? But unfortunately, I feel it's more of the second, unfortunately, which is I apologize for my mistake, mischaracterizing Mozilla, um, with their dual structure and all whatnot.
Well, I could be wrong, but I heard from someone once that the reason that there's even a for-profit arm is it's because of their whole search deal with Google, which you're right. Last I checked was like 80% of their income. So they are dependent on Google. And they basically Google, there's certain rules about who companies can donate money to and whether that counts as like, a tax deduction or like a conflict of interest or whatever. So I think that's why they have such a confusing structure, so they can take money from Google legally. But yeah, I do agree with you. It's still just I don't know. It's so yeah. I just they need to figure out what their direction is and what they want to be. Because I remember what I was going to say. There is a such thing as like a socially motivated corporation, or like a for good. And I think there's actually a legal designation that comes with this. Don't quote me. I'm not a business expert, but I've seen it around where like you're structured like a for profit and you can make money and you can do all the tax write offs and stuff, but your mission is still like your business has to be in line with your mission to make the world a better place, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's um giving shoes to disadvantaged people or whatever. I'm just throwing random stuff out. So like I would have to imagine there has to be a way where Mozilla says like, we can be this for-profit company that can take Google's money, which for the record, I think they should be trying to wean off that. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but we can be sustainable while we work towards these other profit goals. but at the same time, still have those socially motivated ethos. And yeah, I feel like they just keep trying to say like, no, we want these good things, but they have no idea how to get in that direction. It's so frustrating. I want to like Firefox. I really do.
Yeah, well, unfortunately,
Oh,
we're not business consultants, we're privacy guides, and right now we're just telling you the facts straight up, and the facts
true.
right now is saying that Mozilla really needs to turn itself around to, like, you know, still have our hearts. Because I feel like part of our hearts is still with Mozilla, like, I love Firefox, I love using it, but hey,
I love
you gotta report
Firefox.
the truth, report the truth. It's just like, there's definitely a bit of a conflict going on right now, but we wish Mozilla the very best, as a company, and as a nonprofit, and, yeah, and I think it's like, you know, regardless of what happens, let's hope to get it squared out and for the betterment of the privacy community in general speaking.
Fully agree.
Mm.
Right. I think we had some discussions going on at the forum. Specifically, I see here we've highlighted there's a discussion about potentially removing Proton VPN as one of our recommendations. Um, let's see here.
Yeah,
Have
for
you
the record,
have you read up on this one?
I have, yes, two of them actually. There's actually multiple, but I just want to
Okay.
emphasize that we cannot share the post directly on the screen. So kind of relying on our summary, and we can't identify anyone in these threads as they have not officially consented to be recorded. Um, Essentially, there's quite a lot of discussion on whether Proton VPN should be removed from our recommendations because of their wonky integration with kill switch on macOS and Linux. This specific post I linked in our notes mostly details the fact is kill switch on macOS doesn't particularly work when switching on a Proton VPN server or on computer boot up. And for the record, we have like implemented a disclaimer saying kill switch may not necessarily work perfectly on Mac, specifically Intel based Macs. However, there's been a lot of increased discussion on actually whether Proton VPN should be removed or not, just because they don't particularly have a solid feature on Mac OS and Linux. And right now, like a lot of discussion I've noticed is essentially, hey, does this actually impact me in real life? You know, because will this kill switch actually leak data um to the internet or not? And right now, it's a lot of it. The conversation is mostly about whether or not Proton is actually like developing standardized and feature complete features on macOS and Linux compared to Windows, which is but to concede, it is a fair point. We want like our recommendations to have like feature parity across like all major operating systems, ideally, right? Um, so I guess like just like my brief thoughts on this right now, it's like yes, the kill switch feature is important, and right now, like it is like a cornerstone of a lot of our VPN recommendations. However, we will probably need to wait a little more to discuss whether that is a necessary deal breaker for most people. Given the fact that a lot of reasons why we do have recommendations is also based on trust in the company as well. And Proton, whether you like it or not, is somewhat trustworthy, very trustworthy. It depends on your level of trust for any sort of private corporation out there. Um, but at least like from my 2 cents, which is not representative of privacy guides, it's going to take a lot more conversation and community feedback before we discuss either A, removing Proton VPN, or B, implementing a more vocal disclaimer and a recommendation before you someone installs it. Um, so keeping in mind that we are like actively reviewing the thread as we speak, and if there is anything that does pop up, I will make sure to like either interact and inform directly or just let you know officially. All right. So don't worry if like we're not reacting too quickly to it. I think things like this require a lot of time. And a sad thing is, what if we remove Prototype VPN and re-implement it again in a few months? Because they fix this bug. Um, it's just it's we things takes time, but we are definitely watching this thread, and your thoughts are heard regardless if you agree with this decision or not. To like propose this idea in a form. Um,
Cool.
but yeah, Nate, do you have any thoughts on Proton VPN, or do you want to go on to any questions?
Um, I mean, I don't know. It's a tough decision because I think there's a lot of really good points being made. I like Proton. I'm actually probably going to switch to Proton VPN here next year when my Mulvad subscription runs out. I may not. We'll see. There's a lot of factors going into that decision, but um, I do like it. But I think there's on our website, like you said, we do have the note about the kill switch, but we also have, as one of our minimum criteria, it does say that it has to have a kill switch. So, and Proton's development is, as much as I like Proton, it's not always ideal. um, Anyone who's ever used their Linux client can agree that some things don't get the attention and love that they need for sure. So, um, I would like to see a good Proton Drive Linux client someday. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's and I, like you said, this is my personal opinion, not that of Privacy Guides, to be clear. But I wouldn't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, as they say. I think Proton VPN is a very good product for most people, but yeah, like you said, maybe we just need to make that warning a little more prominent, or I'm not entirely sure what the solution is there, but definitely, I mean, that's why we have open discussions. If y'all have suggestions on what would be a good solution, or if everybody thinks that the solution is to remove it, like definitely come in and put a good argument for why you think we should do that. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I think like that pretty much summarizes like kind of like our discussion we have like about that. Like Nate, I was just wondering, have you noticed any like questions from our members like in the YouTube chat?
Um yeah, we've had a pretty lively chat here this week. I haven't seen are these sorry, I'm not like a YouTube expert. Is the little star a member, or does that just mean they're very chatty?
Mm, yeah, I'll be honest with you, I am not familiar who is a member, but I guess we can start with them if you want.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll mix it up this week. We'll start with our YouTube chat and then we'll head over to members on the forum. Um let's see here. So we did mention the people who were active when we were talking about the sorry, my cat was on the desk. When we were talking about the political stuff earlier at the top of the episode. Thank you guys for being active for sure and messaging your politicians. Um, and then let's see here. Sorry, I've been keeping an eye on the chat, but like I said, it's been pretty active this week. Jonah's been sharing some of the really good resources we have on privacy guides about cryptocurrency and the forum post as well. So thank you for keeping an eye on that, Jonah. Let's see here. I did like a comment when we were talking about the Samourai Wallet story, and I said code is free speech. Resplendent 606 said, "I believe code can be considered art as well," which is true. I mean, I don't know code well enough, but I know people who do know code. Have that opinion where they'll look at something and be like, "Oh, this is beautiful. This is like well done. This is minimal. This is clean." And they're not just talking about the formatting; they're talking about the structure of the code and what it does. And so, I mean, yeah, I mean, anything well executed um, can be art in that sense.
Mm. Yeah, agreed.
I
It's very artistic, I would say. Like I feel like I'm just gonna make one brief sentence about this, but like I think like knowing a lot of folks who do like both program and also do art as well, it's just so amazing to see how these like two medias like merge together. It's like a lot of my previous supervisors, so some of the EFF affiliate organizations I've interned for in the past, like they're also artists. And one of them, I believe they like sent a mixtape to the NSA and it's encrypted and that's the art itself. And I'm like, "Oh,
that's
wow."
awesome.
Like, that's insane? And I'm like, okay, just but yeah, going off topic here, I just like it is definitely a form of art and it's definitely a form of free speech.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay, yeah.
Um,
So moving over to the forum, we did have some member questions here. Well, we had JG, who is one of our members. He did want to. He said, please bring this to the attention of people. Excuse me. Please bring this to the people's attention about what Apple's been doing, so they can act on it." And he shared a link to a lot of organizations have gotten together to write an open letter to the EU Commission president about Apple. And these organizations include Proton, Threema. Again, yeah. Let me see here. If I remember correctly, I think this is the DMA. Yeah. So back in April 2025, the European Commission ruled that Apple's App Store policies are illegal under the Digital Markets Act. 6 months later, Apple is still charging developers up to 20% commission on those transactions. So basically, yeah, they're trying to push the EU to crack down a little bit on Apple and actually comply with the DMA. So um, I'm not entirely sure if there's any action that listeners can take. Oh, yes, you can read the full letter and check out the media coverage here. So yeah, I guess if you're in Europe or know people in Europe, definitely check this out and maybe share this story around and let people know what's going on so they can get politically involved, pressure their politicians, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's once again, it kind of falls to our theme of trying to actually reach out to people and let them know that things like this are happening and we should not be happening. And I'd just like to quickly apologize to JG for not including this in our this week's list of stories. Unfortunately, a lot of things are happening across the world,
Yeah.
and it's just sorry if we didn't include your stories, probably because things are so bad. Like we can't include every single privacy related story out there. But I assure you that like I have read what you posted before, and I do think we should probably do something about Apple and make sure that they actually do comply with the Digital Markets Act for sure. So apologies again, JG, but who knows? Maybe in the future, we will try to incorporate a lot of these like suggested stories out there because we do definitely read them. Depends on the
Yeah.
week, of course. I'd like to go over these two questions by Joseph Nobrefalzo from I believe, a Miami technology club, which is like, I remember
Mhm.
like reading through this and I was like, oh, wow, like I'm really glad to see like local organizations like show up in our community. I'll
Yeah.
go over the first question quickly. When did you decide you wanted to film yourself as part of your advocacy work? What thoughts went into that decision? What did you do before and after you started showing yourself to protect your privacy? I guess I'll start first. This is something that accidentally stumbled into, personally speaking. But my background, I was I'm a college student. I'm currently studying for my master's in cybersecurity policy at Tufts, and before that, I was really focused on client work. I initially worked with Cornell Tech's Clinical and Tech Abuse, like helping domestic violence victims deal with surveillance issues, especially from potential workplace harassment or from their ex partners. And then my background obviously was within political communications. I love writing. I was really interested in journalism, but I actually just happened to be really interested in technology as well. But I didn't know how to blend these two together. So I would say like a lot of my work since then has been involved with either Electronic Frontier Foundation affiliated organizations like Free on the Press Foundation and Surveillance Technology Oversight Project. And now I'm working in privacy guides, having a blast. Never thought I would end up a podcast, but hey, I'm here. And if whether it involves showing my face or not, I think it's important to let you know that listen, some sacrifices must be made. And while I may not be, the perfect guy to be in this podcast and to show my face compared to a bunch of other people out there, I still think that it's necessary for it to happen. Because if no one does it, then how can anyone know about it? There sometimes has to be a public face to this. And a lot of people do, in fact, listen to faces a lot more than just a mysterious voice somewhere. So I think humanization is a very important part of this, and I think, like, I also wanna applaud, like, everyone at Privacy Guides who did, like, take this step to actually help people inform themselves about how to keep themselves safe in this surveillance age.
Yeah. Cool. Um, for me, well, no, I'm laughing because for me, I just don't really think ahead. Story of my life. So I started showing my face when I started co-producing Surveillance Report with Henry from Techlore, and I actually remember the phone call. We were chatting, and he was kind of interviewing me, seeing like because he didn't really know who I was. I think at the time probably, which is fair because I my project was still super new. So he was kind of like feeling out, like, okay, what's this guy like? What are his values and stuff? And he did mention, he's like, yeah, I always show my face. I'm not sure. He's like, maybe we could like, maybe if you wanted to wear like a mask or something. And I was just like, I'll show my face. I don't really care. And I think I didn't really understand how big that project was going to get, or because y'all got to understand, I am the kind of person that I've started multiple online projects. Like I've had websites for bands. I've been in multiple bands. I think I even had like a website dedicated to an anime one time. I think it was Bleach. Just
Ooh.
before anybody asks. So yeah, so I mean, I've done all these things online that like, oh yeah, we got like 50 visitors tops, and then we just kind of got bored and stopped doing it. So honestly, when I started my own privacy work, I didn't really expect it to take off. And especially because originally my goal was just to make something for my immediate friends and family. I didn't say like, oh, I want to make this website and advertise it to people. I made it for my friends and family. And then I was like, well, maybe other people can get help out of it too. Cause I saw people asking about like, I don't know where to start. What are first steps? And I'm like, well, I made this for my friends and family, but if it helps you, here, have it. And then the next thing I know, here I am. So for me, it was kind of just like, I don't really think this is going to be a big deal anyways. I don't really care. Um, but yeah, kind of like you said, I definitely don't blame people who don't want to show their face, like people like Jack Resider and the hated one. And like, hey, if you want to do that, I fully respect that. But I'm glad I did it because I do feel like it adds a layer of humanness and just kind of I think it's a little easier for people to connect with a face and be like, oh, there's a person. Like I actually do remember one of my readers, longtime readers, the first time I appeared on Surveillance Report, he's like, it's reassuring to know you're not just like some 12-year-old in his bedroom or something. But not that there's anything wrong with that for the record, but he's like, oh, you actually like you have some life experience, you kind of know what you're talking about in some of these situations. So yeah, I mean, what did I do before and after to protect my privacy? The same things I'm still doing. For one, I'm very open about this. Nate is not my real name. I don't use my real name. I use data removal. I use easy opt-outs personally. I do have the Google results about you and Optory, both the free tier of Optory, to kind of fill in the gaps if I miss anything. If I have the time, I do check for any data removal stuff. But yeah, for the most part, it's mainly just compartmentalizing my life. I try to keep my privacy work very separate from my personal life, and yeah, I don't know. I think this works so far. Hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully, I'm not
For the
pissing anyone
record,
off to test that.
I did not conduct any like privacy protecting measures like you did. So maybe I should have used my real name. I was given an option to do so, and I was like, Kev works. Kevin, same thing. But yeah, in hindsight, maybe I should have done that. I didn't ever expect to be on a podcast, anyways. But hey, you know what? My real name is in fact Kevin. This is not trying to throw anyone off who's trying to investigate me. I assure you, it's Kevin. It's not like something else. I don't know. But
You're doing like
yeah,
5 layers of reverse psychology right now.
yeah. Maybe the FBI agent monitoring this podcast right now will get really confused. Is Kevin really my real name? We shall never know. Um. Also, Nate, are you familiar with like how we do subtitles on your shorts? Like, I think if I remember when I did like that as well with TikTok, it was an automatic feature on TikTok. I wasn't sure if that's what you used as well.
So I use the automatic feature in DaVinci Resolve, which is my video editor. And I think it uses Whisper, which is open source, if I remember correctly. And it's honestly, it's really impressive. Like there's times I've watched it, especially with the first few times I used it, and I try to proof watch them all. I know a couple have slipped through the cracks here, and I really apologize. But I try to proof watch them all. I try to make sure they're accurate and they're not like messing up a word. But the first time I used it, it got every single word right. It even capitalized like TikTok, or because I think one of the first times I used it was a video talking about like the TikTok ban or something. Um, I mean, it's really impressive, and yeah, like I said, I try to proofread it and make sure that it's correct, but um, that's kind of the only way that I know how to do it, and yeah, because otherwise the auto generated ones, I don't know why, especially on YouTube, they could use a better AI model, but for some reason their automatically generated subtitles are really horrendous, and they have no like punctuation, and they get words wrong all the time, and it's just really hard to read along with it. And I say this as somebody without any kind of like reading disabilities or anything. It's yeah, it's hard, but I don't know if because Jordan and I split video editing. I don't know if Jordan uses something different, but that's what I use personally.
Yeah, I think like we can all definitely share our own techniques, like to you, like if you ever like have any questions about that. Like I think we've definitely talked about how we do things. Like if there's like a question, for example, you have for example on a specific video on how we did things, make sure to like comment under and ask, hey Jordan, hey Nate, how did you do this? And I'm sure like we'll be more than happy to like, explain to detail if you have any other questions related to videos. Um, I think it's a great time to move on to the next user. Privacy is consent. Um, Privacy guides, back when it was privacy tools, used to have a list of questions they would ask service providers to get additional first-hand information about the organization behind the service. There used to be quite a bit of emphasis on transparency of ownership and public accountability. As more governments and governing bodies around the world become increasingly hostile to privacy enhancing technologies, do you think a similar list of questions from privacy guides would favor products with a decentralized, multinational, pseudonymous, and directorial plural leadership? If not, how long do you think organizations like Proton from Switzerland and GrapheneOS France could potentially last playing jurisdictional cat and mouse? Apologize for the twisted words. I sometimes have trouble reading things. Um, Anyways, I think just to answer your question, for the record, both me and Nate, we weren't available during the PTIO days. I do
Mhm.
remember subscribing to the subreddit 4 or 5 years ago, but that's all I really tell you about the process with that PTIO. So I can't really confirm like whether or not like those questions were actively sent out. What I can do say though is I kind of restate what we currently do in our forum, which is we rely heavily on community consensus, right? So if you were to have a proposal and post it in a specific category on a website, for example, if you're a developer, you do something to a showcase, or if you are just have any suggestion, do an our guide suggestion or tool suggestion, so on and so forth. What you could do is if there's a lot of community like push for it, and a lot of people in the staff do agree with it, what happens is that there's usually someone who would try to do like a GitHub like pull request, like create an issue, and then like in that pull request, kind of like write a draft of what will appear on the website, right? And then people within the privacy guys community, it could be anyone, it could be a team member or someone just like on the forum, will eventually like contribute to it over time until eventually I guess approved by either like Jonah or some of the other like staff member as well. I can't recall who exactly is in this like final committee. It's like Jonah, Freddie, and I
I think
forgot
Nick
Daniel?
is
Nick is
part of
in the
it.
committee. Nick is part of it. Yeah. Well, I think they're just definitely like I think there's like definitely like a lot of like management by like the core members of the Privacy Guy staff as well. So like keep that in mind as well as that we don't really have specific questions we assert towards companies anymore. That what they usually do is they come to our form itself and then eventually someone really likes them, they'll write a PR for them if and we'll approve it if there's a lot of community support and we have our own suggestions as well. So it's a bit of a mix and match of like a bunch of things as well. So if I'm gonna quickly answer a question. No, we don't have a list of questions. You asked the questions. Um, and do I think if whether these questions would actually like favor projects with a decentralized and multinational approach? Then again, I don't really know these questions, so I it depends on the questions being asked, you know. But if we do have this level of format, it innately requires us to actually have companies begging to join our forum, which I think will take like a few more years at least until we reach that level of notoriety, I'd say. Um, if not, how long do I think organizations like Proton AG or Graphene OS could potentially last playing jurisdictional cat and mouse? This is the thing though. It's like for starters, I want to make a correction. Graphene OS is not based in France. They're based in Canada. They just have a few servers here and there, like located in France that they recently relocated, mostly revolving their social media presence and their website. So they aren't necessarily based in France. But just to answer your question, we don't know how long they'll last playing Jersey Cat and Mouse, but I'm sure that these companies or projects have contingency plans, and it's probably best to ask them directly if you want to know certainly what are their plans if they need to migrate. I'm sure Proton has drawn up a few plans in the past, back when this one was really discussing their surveillance law, and I think one of the options was like they would just simply distribute their servers across like Europe, including Iceland, Germany. Um, Maybe the Netherlands, I don't know. But in terms of like the headquarters, though, that's a more of a question you might have to ask Proton itself because we can't really speculate, and it would be unfair for us to speculate what these like projects or companies are doing. And same with Graphene OS. If Canada ever does something really bad that focuses, that forces, like that project to migrate somewhere, um, they have plans for it. And since Graphene has developers from all across the world, they're able to survive like one of the main developers being shut off in the war in Ukraine. If they could do that, I'm sure they can survive anything, I'd say. So I would say don't worry too much about jurisdiction. Just focus more so on, I would say whether or not you can use a service or not, whether or not the service actually works best for you. I'd say these projects have plans. We don't really know them, but let's trust them for now. I'd say.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think in answer to the first question, like, would these questions favor projects with decentralized pseudonymous directorial leadership. I don't think they would favor them necessarily because any questions that we would come up with sorry, my cat is antsy. Any questions that we would come up with, I think would be for the interest of transparency. You know, it wouldn't necessarily be like I don't I think, for example, you know, Signal is not decentralized, right? And if you read Moxie Marlin Spikes, there's like an old blog post where he said why he doesn't like decentralization. And I think he makes some very valid arguments. And that's not to say he's right. It's one of those things where there is no right or wrong. Like he's got some good arguments there that things like Matrix clearly demonstrate are true. But then, you know, Signal has crashed from time to time when there's like too much traffic and they can't handle it. And a decentralized thing like Mastodon, you know, the main Mastodon service goes down and all the other smaller servers are like, oh no, well, they'll come back whenever they come back. The rest of us are still running. So, you know, it's an point being, like, I don't think we favor any specific type of organization in that sense. I think it's more that we want to make sure that these organizations are operating in good faith. They're not like a shell company for the CIA. They're not, you know, their CEO also sits on the board of, you know, Palantir or something like that, which I know when you get to certain projects, that's becomes a very gray area. But it's like, so it's not so much about the structure as it is about like just making sure that this is a good faith project that has people behind it that can be trusted, or at least can start, like, let's say it's somebody who's brand new, who's, you know, fresh out of college, has no history. Well, at least we can say he doesn't work for the NSA as far as we know. So like, let's see what happens. Let's see where he goes. You know, I think that's the point of those kind of criteria. Um, and yeah, I'm with Kevin on the second one too. Like it's you can't predict the future. And so it's there's a balance. You know, Proton is starting to move their servers around because what if that law does go through in Switzerland? Like, what if it doesn't? Okay, great, no problem. Then you moved your servers for nothing. But what if it does go through? And you know, they can't just like it's one thing for me as an individual. Like, you know, I have a Jellyfin server that is literally sitting in a mini PC in my living room right now. I can physically pick that thing up, walk it to another location, and plug it back in. You know, like Proton can't do that. They can't just overnight, like, oh, okay, ship all our servers to Germany. Like that is a massive, massive undertaking. And so they kind of have to think ahead and plan for a worst case scenario, but we can't really predict the future. Like how long could they last? We don't know because some of these laws may not come to pass. Some countries may never implement these laws. Some countries may implement them and then have a regime change. Literally, I shouldn't have used the word regime because that has a negative connotation, but they have a change of administration. They have a new president or prime minister come in who's like, this is unconstitutional and rolls everything back. Like, I don't know. It's really hard to predict the future like that, but it's good to think about these worst case scenarios. You know, what if Proton goes away? What are you going to do instead? But yeah, it's hard to predict the future.
Maybe self-hosting is the only path forward, you know? Like RAM prices and all that, who cares? You know, like you can just move your server and move to another country, you know? Like doesn't matter, right? Like move your Jellyfin server to, I don't know, some nice Thailand or something. I don't know.
Okay, counterpoint though. I'm just going to turn my apartment into a data center and then get a tax write off for it. So I'll
Oh,
self-host and not have to pay rent. I think
do
I'm
you know what
onto
you can also
something
do
here.
as well? You can take advantage of the Dutch American Friendships Treaty. Do that. Start a small business as a contractor with privacy guides, and then use that to live in the Netherlands, you know, and then just like remotely work from there, you know? Maybe you should do that.
Is this a thing? Hold on. I
It's
need to
actually a
go
thing. No, I'm serious. I
renegotiate my contract. Oh my
For the
goodness.
record, Jonah, if you're watching, this is not a serious conversation. We are joking. We will not work illegally outside the country.
Jonah's definitely watching.
He is, he is. But
um,
yeah, speaking of you and Jonah, apparently you missed a few questions from Tropics 8997.
I
Uh,
did.
he said, you missed my two other questions last week because you thought Jonah answered them all. Nate, no problem though. Three questions.
Sorry.
Well, I'll start with the first one. Is there any way to keep control of passwords and secrets while still being able to give up control of them to a trust family member or a friend when you die, such as you get hit by a bus tomorrow? Um,
Well, the first thing that pops into my head is stuff like Bitwarden has their family legacy thing. Like, I think my wife and I are actually set up on that. Where if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, then she can request access to my Bitwarden account, and if I don't deny that within 7 days, she gets access. So, yeah, you could store, which we recommend using a password manager, and I think Bitwarden is one of the recommended ones. You could store your passwords and secrets in there. Um, Otherwise, yeah, I think, for more, unconventional things, I think you just have to have someone you really, really trust, like, I was very open a couple years ago. My mom passed away, and that actually did prompt a lot of discussions in our family about, what do we do if you pass away, and how are people going to get access to your accounts, and how's your stuff organized? And I do have a couple friends that trust me a lot, and they're like, "Hey, if anything happens to me, here's my Bitwarden login." Like they actually gave me their login info. So, um, yeah, I mean, as far as technical controls, I don't know. I feel like something like a password legacy feature would hit up most of your concerns, but for some of the more, again, out of the box things that you can't put in a password manager, you might have to just find someone you really, really, really trust, I think.
Mm. Yeah, trust is very important as well. Like I agree with that 100%. And also for starters as well, like if you're like technically competent enough to code something, you could code a deadman switch if that's more up your alley. I think it's pretty easy to do so. I think you just send an email automatically when you haven't responded and that's haven't like clicked the button in like let's say 7 days or so, and that's pretty much
True.
like a more custom self-made feature. If you have if you have like content or password secrets that isn't necessarily protected by a traditional password manager, such as for example your login to your PC, right? So, I think like that's something to keep in mind as well. Is like this is something you can easily do yourself. Um, there are a lot of services to do online. You can just do it automatically for you. You can program it. It's pretty easy. But yeah, like I'd say like I agree with you 100% on like the other things you mentioned though about like keeping your legacy. When if you pass away.
I just
His
want to
second
address real quick a couple comments in the live chat. One person said, "Can you not just write it in your will?" You could, but that assumes that you pay a lawyer to hold on to your will, because otherwise, if you just got your will in the closet, what stops somebody from going through that? Would be my argument. And Resplendent said, "What about using KeyPass XE with Sync Thing?" Yeah, but that doesn't have like a legacy feature, so they would still need to know how to get into your your KeyPass in the first place. At which point, again, you're just trusting them not to. So, which again, if you trust them that much, like that's fine. But uh, also, real quick, Lucas said, "How would a company know if you're dead?" That's the point. Is like the person has to request access, and then it's on you. They send you an email that's like, "Hey, this person requested access," and you have to reject that. You have to actively reject it. Otherwise, in 7 days or however many days, it automatically gives them access because it assumes that you're dead. It's I fully accept it's probably not a perfect system. There's probably ways to game it, but I mean, I think it's the best I can come up with personally. So
Yeah,
sorry.
maybe like don't be in a coma, I guess. That's the best solution we
I mean,
have.
but
Uh,
same thing. If I'm in a coma, like my wife still needs to pay the rent and pay the bills and get into the
uh,
bank account, which I mean, she has access to the bank account. She should have access to all this stuff. But you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's
yeah,
functionally it's the same thing, I would argue.
yeah, true, true. Yeah, I forgot about that completely. But yeah, let's go on to the second question by Tropics. If age verification laws pass all across the world tomorrow, what would you do? Ultimately, I'll be using the internet less. I'm already doing this with the insteadification of the internet. I'm going back to analog devices to really help keep me sane, such as reading more books and journaling. Um, if they do pass, unfortunately, there's something called, getting having a job and then just accessing the internet normally as required of as a university student. And I feel like I don't know if something like LinkedIn ever like requires age verification mandate. I think I'm gonna have to follow it, unfortunately. But I feel like for other services that do require age verification but aren't as important, such as Spotify, for example, or YouTube. I will definitely be circumventing that. Trust me. Like I do not care enough about YouTube or Spotify or whatever to like warrant like giving my ID. It's annoying. Like I rather just like do some weird funky workaround using a front end or something rather than just do that. But yeah, I guess that's just my opinion though. I just personally like will need to use these services unfortunately. But hey, you know what, Nate? Sometimes you can't avoid that. But the best solution is just not have these laws in the first place, right?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know what I would do, honestly. I think it would depend on I think my first instinct would be wait and see, because I think most of the services I don't use, um, I wouldn't really like need desperately. So I can kind of afford to wait and see what happens, in the sense of like, you mentioned like I would be using workarounds. Okay, but what workarounds? Like what would we use? And I think it also depends, like age verification, I think is such a broad term. Like, what do we mean when we say like, are we talking about like, okay, things that have more than 33% adult content or whatever, like the current, oh, there's been so many of these crappy laws. I can't even remember which one that was, but one of them proposed that standard. That may have been like state laws for porn. And so in those cases, like, do those count as like, is it just those websites? In which case, honestly, I can probably live without most of them, as far as I know. Um, so yeah, I'd probably just stop using those ones. Is it like the entire internet? Well, then, truthfully, I don't know how I'm going to find out what the workarounds are without something like YouTube or, is it? Does that apply to like Signal? Like, these are things we talked about in the interview with Taylor Lorenz. Like, I don't know. It really depends on how extreme it would be. Some things like Signal, I'm fully enmeshed in. I don't know if I can find a way around it. And again, if I just stop using Signal, will that apply to SMS? Like, do I have to verify my age on my phone? It really depends. I'm overthinking this, I know. But yeah, I think ideally what I would try to do is I would try to wait and see. I would try to like hang back, give it time for people to say, oh, this is like for the word to get around, like, oh, this is a workaround, this is a workaround. And I would try to find those workarounds personally. Because yeah, I don't think the vast majority of services, I really just don't trust. I just don't. I don't trust them to implement this in a way that is safe and reasonable, where they're not being overly invasive. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I feel like at the end of the day, like with these services, like it just depends entirely on, do you really need this? Can we exclude it? Let's have some form of digital minimalism out there, you know? And I think it's nice that I see this user like try to like, not necessarily use the internet all the time. And I think like something that I do want to do or strive to be in the future. And I honestly applaud you for trying to do that yourself, Tropics. But yeah, I think like this next question is more up your valley, Nate. Like as a self-hoster, I think did they want to use Stalwart? I'm not familiar with that.
I'm not either, but the actual question, which unfortunately I don't, well, I don't think I have an answer. You say, is it possible to see the domains associated with that mail server? So like, I'm assuming Stalwart is maybe like one of those helps you set it up on a VPS or maybe a VPS provider. So you say it's possible to see what mail server domain check is using by checking the MX records, but I wonder if it's possible to build a profile of someone by checking a domain pointed to the mail server. So in other words, like, if I understand this correctly, if I'm using, I don't know, Namecheap. If I'm using Namecheap for my mail, you can look up, what is my email? Nate at privacyguides.org, I think. You can look that up and see, you know, who the email provider is. But can you look up Namecheap and see everybody who's using Namecheap as an email provider? My gut, I don't know, for the record. But my gut tells me it's technologically possible, but I don't know if anybody's built a service that does that. And I also feel like that's probably not a very scalable service, if we're honest, because the vast majority of people are probably going to be using a major provider of some kind. So it's kind of like, um, not really a one to one, but I made the argument one time in a blog post that um, a lot of people are uncomfortable with the idea of like using a custom domain for email, because they're like, oh, but what if I'm tracked via that domain? And my argument is, so many people are using Gmail that tracking at the domain level, I don't think makes sense. If we're talking automated, if we're talking like the NSA is going to sit down and look at every single data breach and go, oh, this one custom domain pops up in all these locations, it's probably the same person. Yes, that's different. But if we're talking about automated scanning and stuff, I think so many people are using like Gmail, for example. I think they have like 80% of the email market share, that it doesn't make sense to be like, oh, this person's using Gmail, we're going to single out on that. They're going to look for that same email address, the entire address. So theoretically, if you have a custom domain with like simple login and you're using a different email everywhere, even though it's the same custom domain, I don't think you're going to be tracked. So going back to this, if so many, like if everybody or like 80% of people are using the same handful of providers, I kind of don't see how effective that would be, in terms of like, there'd just be too much noise to sift through, I feel like, unless I'm misunderstanding this question. But again, I don't know for sure. That's just like logically, that's what my brain is kind of going.
Mm. Yeah, as someone who has no experience self-hosting emails, I do say like, like if you do like mistrust any service, um, make sure to definitely like interact with the community that have used something like Star Wars, for example. Maybe they may know more exactly than us. But honestly though, like feel free to ask this question like on the forum itself. Maybe there are people like in our community that have used Star Wars and could actually like help you like learn whether or not hey this is actually a genuine like threat model for me or not. Maybe that would be more helpful for you. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, like Nate, I think like I want to quickly look through our YouTube chat for any other questions. I was wondering anything that pops up to you.
No, I haven't seen any new ones popped in. We did I mean, there were some comments when we were talking about the password manager thing. But we just yeah, Lucas Trauman here did say plan A, don't die, which, I mean, yeah. My dark joke I like to make is I don't know, man, I read the news, but jokes aside, yeah, it is important to think about that stuff. So and
Yeah.
I guess we'll say this one real quick. You also said if they're going to force me to use age verification, they should at least create a confirmation platform that doesn't share my personal information and makes the government take responsibility. It, not to get too off topic, but this is an argument I make about this like identity verification stuff. Is I would argue, and again, I'm not a tech expert, like in terms of code and stuff. So if I'm wrong, feel free to tell me why. But in my brain, I feel like it should be possible to create a private identity verification. It should be possible to make an app that, when you go to an adult website, for example, all it gives is a yes or no. Is this person over 18? Yes, let them in. No, don't let them in. Like it should be that. And for the record, I realize this is so not going to solve problems. This is the same thing as like, oh, you need a credit card to verify your age. And okay, cool. The kid will just go steal their parents' credit card or whatever. Like, or I had a card when I was 16. So it really doesn't mean anything. But my point is like, I feel like there is a way that it is technologically possible to do it. And maybe all the data is stored on device. So there's no server leaking all of this crap. But it's just, companies don't do it because there's no incentive. Companies are not incentivized to make this app. They're incentivized to make the app where they control the data. There's vendor lock-in. They sell the data to advertisers out the door on the back because that's what they all do is, they get that extra side income by selling to targeted advertisers. And there's no privacy laws in the US. So therefore it doesn't matter. They can do whatever they want. And yeah, it's like, it's technologically possible, I think. And that's what frustrates me is with these age verification laws, or again, identity verification, is we could have a world where, again, I don't think it's going to solve every problem, but it's like, okay, fine. We can take steps to solve this problem in a privacy preserving way, but that effort is not being made in any way, shape, or form. And it frustrates me.
Yeah, and even if there's like a centralized, like government, like system of which okay, it'll connect to the government, like system to like conduct age verification. Do we really want to normalize that just to use access
Yeah.
basic services? Like we don't want that. And
Yeah.
even if we do have on-device verification, I think a lot of us were really excited when like I believe the US started like kind of like testing out and accepting like digital passports, because it's like basically a way for these potentially a proof of concept for on-device verification, right? But
Mhm.
it's kind of like other countries have already implemented very similar things, but there's still so much fragmentation out there. Um, so I'm just like worried we're rushing out these laws, but we don't have a mature process for either on-device verification or a centralized government platform to actually handle this securely. And so what actually happens by default is different identification companies, such as some I forgot, I can't remember, like Octo, for example, or you probably know more than I do. Like they just like collect all your ID cards and they just store it somewhere and just waiting for a breach to happen. So it's just right now these companies already exist and they're already like using your like IDs and storing them. And I'm just I'm just sad to it's just sad to see that we're just rushing out solutions to problems so actually having the ability to actually support them in a secure way.
Yeah. Yeah, and for the record, I want to address Jonah just said in the chat. He's like, this type of age verification is still not a good idea. I agree. I do want to make it clear. Like, I'm not saying like I want to see this. I'm just saying like it's one of those things where it's like if you're going to roll this out, you could at least make an argument for something that's more privacy preserving. But it's and I still wouldn't be in favor of it. Like I said, there's still tons of holes in this. Like, what's to stop a kid from taking my phone, especially me. I have literally like 4 phones next to me right now. So like what if I had kids, what's to stop my kid from swiping one of the phones I don't use very often where I'm not going to notice this, like my iPhone for example. What's to stop like a kid from hacking I don't know, like there's definitely ways to work around it. It's not really a foolproof thing, so I don't think it's the right solution. I'm just saying like, yeah, I agree. In theory, it's totally possible. Um, it's just yeah, it's ridiculous.
I just feel like just want to make our lives harder for no reason, you know? Like trying to jam through solutions that just ends up making me not be able to use my phone the way I want it to be. You know, it's just whatever. So
Well,
annoying,
again,
but
it's they're looking for the easy button. They just want this easy, like everybody just wants something easy. And I get that. Like it's human nature. We want a good guy and a bad I think I said this last week. We want a good guy and a bad guy. We want like a yes or no. We want these very simple, like, the Samurai Wallet story we covered earlier. Like it's really easy to buy into that narrative of like, oh, these guys did nothing wrong and they're being totally screwed over. But it's a very nuanced thing. Unfortunately, life very rarely has a black and white, yes or no, easy, good guy, bad guy. Like it's usually some kind of gray area in the middle. So yeah.
mm, yeah, we can't really like decide that. You know, I think at the end of the day, I wish nuance was a more popular trend across the world, but unfortunately, that is not the case. And when people are lazy at a job, it just results in consequences that just harm us all. You know, but yeah,
Yeah.
there is
Me
one
too.
something, however, that is black and white, which is supporting privacy guides. Because I heard that right now it's 7:17, which is a record, I feel. Wow, time flies, you know? So
Yeah.
I think we're probably gonna end the show out right now, given the time. Give Nate some time back. All the updates from this week in privacy we shared here on the vlog every week. So subscribe with your favorite RSS reader if you want to stay tuned. However, for people who prefer audio, we're going to be trying a podcast style recording of these updates every week, live streamed on our YouTube channel. Privacy Guys is an impartial, nonprofit organization that's focused on building a strong privacy advocacy community and delivering the best digital privacy and consumer technology rights advice on the internet. If you want to support our mission, then you can make a donation on our website at www.privacyguides.org. To make a donation, click the red heart icon located on the top right corner of the page. You can contribute using standard fiat currency via debit or credit card, or opt to donate anonymously using Monero, not a mixer, or with your favorite cryptocurrency. Becoming a paid member unlocks exclusive perks like early access to video content and priority during the This Week in Privacy livestream Q&A. You also get a cool badge on your profile in your Privacy Guys forum and a warm, fuzzy feeling of supporting independent media. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a wonderful night, rather long night, but have a safe holidays and safe travels if you're going home. Bye, everyone.